It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. Do you want to play a game? Go on. Should we play a Monday morning game? Let's see how long it lasts. But you remember I talked to you last week a bit about optimism. You have to be optimistic. It doesn't really... I mean, unless your scarf is tied so tightly around your neck that you can barely speak... you have to be optimistic, whoever is taking over, because you want what's best for, if not what's best for your country, then you want what's best for yourself, really. So you have to be optimistic about a new Prime Minister. I remember being optimistic about Rishi Sunak for about 3.5 hours, and then he reappointed Suella Braverman. But you a bit of optimism about Andy Burnham. So every Monday... I'm going to ask you to text me quickly, and we'll close it down at 10:10. So don't message me after 10:10. In about 2 hours' time, I'll get a few messages that won't make any sense at all. They'll just be random numbers appearing in my inbox because people are listening on catch-up and didn't realise. They forgot they were listening on catch-up. Some of the most, what would you call them? Strange. I was looking for a Latin word there, but I can't think of one. It was a bit like non sequitur, but not quite. Some of the most odd... incongruous is a nice word. Messages I get, I look at and I think, what on earth is... Oh, they're listening 2 hours ago. They're listening on catch-up. So, a mark out of 10. How optimistic are you currently feeling about Andy Burnham? I'm still at 8 or 9. I'm not going to lie to you. I will, no doubt, rue the day that I dared to dream, because it is, of course, not the despair that gets you. We can deal with the despair, but hope. It's the hope that gets you every time. So I'm going to go for 8 or 9, 8.5. 8.5. Any advance on 8.5? 8.5 going once, going... So just send me your number now. And what we'll do... I should probably have checked this with Eleanor before we came on air. Can we do some science on this? Can we keep all the numbers? We're just going to pretend, are we? We're just going to lick our finger, stick it in the air, and then announce that the numbers have gone up or down every Monday. So we're at about 8.5 at the moment. I'm going to keep all your numbers. Oh, you're a miserable old soul, Edward, with a mere 5. Honestly, there you go. Be more Elaine. Elaine's got a 9. So what are the figures? What is the number? What are we going to call it? The optimism index. The Andy Burnham ABID. Can we come the Burnham barometer? BB. That's good. Well played, Keith. The Burnham barometer. I want to get optimism in it. Bob. The Burnham optimism barometer. Bob, Monday morning Bob. We're doing a Bob. We're having a Bob on a Monday morning. Bob, it's up and down. There you go, the Bob. It's the Bob. It's the Monday morning Bob. I'm going to write that down, otherwise, as you know, I will forget it. It's the Burnham Optimism Barometer. And is there any way anyone could add them all up and then divide it by the number of people? Surely we can do that, Eleanor, can't we? If this was the BBC, we'd probably have graphs. If this was the bloody newsagents, they'd have a dedicated producer. If Emily Maitlis had come up with this idea, they'd be hiring someone now to be in charge of the Burnham Optimism Barometer. But on this show, on this piddling little show, we never get anything. Poor old Keith, he'd have to do it in his lunch hour if he wasn't so... tuned in with his rights up the workers. So anyway, what is your optimism level? I'm not playing, says Colin, because I got Danny Dyer's age wrong by about 11 years. Yeah, a lot of us did, actually, Colin. And don't forget the birthday. We have birthday fun as well, but maybe not every day. So the Burnham Optimism Barometer is closing in 2.5 minutes, and I'd like you to put the figure which best describes, that best sums up your Bob index today, your Burnham Optimism Barometer. You can tell we're moving on to something tricky because I've injected that first 5 minutes of the show with entirely inappropriate levity and fun. I mean this. It's a phrase that we come up with things, don't we, quite regularly together on the programme, and then we forget about them almost immediately. But one thing that has stuck in my mind, and I hope in yours, is the idea of subjects that we all could confront, encounter, come up against, about which we know nothing until we need to know everything. Just think about that for a moment. I really think it does some heavy lifting, that phrase. You know nothing about it until you need to know everything. You're aware of it, of course you are, because it's talked about a lot. That's why I mentioned children's mental health, or mental health in general, actually, but particularly children's mental health from a parent's point of view. You've got a vague idea that there's something called CAMS out there. You presume that you can make a phone call and get some help when you find yourself in incredibly dark times. There must be somewhere you can turn to, and then guess what? There isn't, or at least it's incredibly hard to access. You suddenly need to know everything. under the same umbrella, you'd put eating disorders and things like that. Things about which you know nothing until you suddenly need to know everything. I tell you what, the Bob quotient is high. The Bob quotient is high today. I wonder how long that's going to last. Try to remind me, because we'll forget. Every Monday, I'll take the temperature of the nation by inviting you to contribute to the Burnham Optimism Barometer. And the Bob figure, every Monday, we'll track it and we'll see where we're going. It could go down, it could go up again, but we shall see. Things about which you know nothing until you need to know everything. You almost hesitate to... or I'm almost hesitating to describe my own situation on this. So I've got an elderly mum, and then I've got a mother-in-law and my wife's stepfather, very, very, very much part of the family. And all three of them currently live in their own homes. And you wonder what might be on the horizon. You wonder what might be in place should they no longer be able to look after themselves. You don't want to jinx anything by saying, I can't quite imagine that happening anytime soon, but you don't know, do you? And then suddenly, when you find yourself in that moment, you need to know everything about a subject that you maybe thought you had a passing understanding of, because goodness knows that bloke on LBC, whether it's me or Nick or... obviously Sheila's not a bloke, but you've heard it on your favourite radio station several times. You've a party to the conversations. You maybe tune it out a little bit, because it's not immediately relevant to you. But, what if you go into a home, I think you might have to sell your house at some point. It's all okay. And then, boom, Mum can't look after herself anymore. Granddad needs to go into a home, that dread phrase. What's going to happen? How are you going to pay for it? How much is it going to cost? I'm going to make some admissions to you. I'm going to make some confessions to you. I still don't really understand a lot of it. I can't remember, for example, why Theresa May's proposals blew up in her face so damagingly. I really can't. I can't remember why. I think that there was something about a threshold, which is currently £23,500. So if you've got assets worth in excess of £23,500, I think you will be required to sell them. You will be compelled to sell them, i.e. forced. You will have to sell them to pay for your social care, to pay for your fees if you go into a home. And Theresa May was going to raise it to 100,000, and she was going to break... You see, I do this for a living, but I don't need to know everything about it. So at the moment, I'm pretty close to knowing nothing. And forewarned is, of course, forearmed. I think if I felt a little bit closer to the possibility, I hope I would now be paying more attention. I hope I would now be digging into things more. Did you know that Keir Starmer had a go at addressing this? I've got the figure, I don't know why, I've got the figure of £83,000 in my head. So I've got £100,000 next to Theresa May's face, and I've got £83,000 next to Keir Starmer's. When Andy Burnham was Health Secretary in 2009... he did actually propose a universal system of social care, and he did pursue the idea of a compulsory levy to fund it. Of course, the government didn't really survive for long enough for it to be more examined, but there was an idea of deferring the payment until after people had died, which of course led the Tories to brand it a death tax. I presume that some people are paying millions of pounds, hundreds of thousands of pounds for social care. You sell the house and every penny ends up going on the social care costs, while as other people are paying nothing because they don't need it. Imagine if the rest of the NHS worked like that. Imagine if, God forbid, you got cancer and your neighbour didn't, and you had to sell your house to treat your cancer. You had to find the money to pay your medical bills. Social care, not technically a medical bill, but it might as well be. Yeah? We can agree on that, I think. It's probably a historical disaster that the two have been separated. But imagine if it was everything else. Imagine if you broke your leg. You know how fascinated I am by the notion we talked... Why did we talk about it last week? That the amount of money... Oh, because of the research into poverty and this bizarre sort of brain gristle that some people have that it prevents them from understanding that you can actually run out of money. Working, functioning adults and non-working functioning adults can run out of money. They can run out of money before they run out of month. And I'm always interested, happily these days, in a largely academic sense, by what would be enough to really knock you off the rails, to really knock you off your feet. I don't know why I often reach for a broken boiler, because come the winter, you really need a boiler. You really need heating in your house, but you also need to find a few grand in order to get a new one, and you have not got a few grand. You've got nowhere to go for it. Imagine if that was medicine. You know, it's medieval, right? Well, it's not. It's probably just 19th century. You've got to find the money to pay the sore bones, as doctors used to be called. You break your leg, what are you going to do? You've got to find the money to get it set. Otherwise, you're going to be damaged for life. Any other area of care, healthcare, any other area of healthcare? Listen, I appreciate you can pay money to get better treatment or a shorter wait, but you can't. You can never be so poor that you're not going to get any treatment at all. And so it is with social care. If you're really poor, the state will pay for it. But if you've got £23,500 in assets, you're paying for it yourself. So one of the reasons why it's controversial, it's quite hard to get your head around this stuff. Because why is it so controversial? Because one of the reasons is that if they were to introduce... well, at the moment, it's almost as if you get penalised for having money. And that, of course, is anathema to anybody, even remotely right-wing. You know, this is outrageous. I've worked... you hear it a lot during the private education debates, don't you? I've worked bloody hard to send my child to private school. Why on earth should I have to pay VAT on my school fees? Which, of course, implicitly suggests that 90% of the country who are never going to have enough cash to send their children to private school are somehow not working as hard as Chummo on line 2, which is a ludicrous suggestion, but one that you have to sustain to if you want to cling to the notion that you were born 3-0 up but somehow scored a hat-trick in life. So, you know, if you get to the end of your life and you haven't got enough assets to qualify for a compulsory purchase of your home, you could have been working as a police officer or a nurse, you could have been in the army, you could have been down a mine back in the day. The idea that it means that you have not worked as hard as the people who've got assets is ridiculous. Similarly, you could have been really careful with very little income, and you end up with very little to show for it at the end of your life. So the person over there say, well, I've been really careful, I've gone without. There will always be some people who are, if you like, swinging the lead or the exceptions that prove the rule. You've lived a life of fecklessness and debauchery, and you get to the end of your days and you can't look after yourself, you haven't got a pot to pee in, and therefore the state will step in and look after you. And that's not fair, because he was going out all the time when we were kids, and he had a nice car, and he crashed. Do you see what I mean? These, what you might call anecdotal anomalies, are always going to plague social policy. But I think we should probably pay a little bit less attention to them than some of the media commentators and right-wing politicians tell us to. So you've got money, and you have to pay. You have to give it to the carers. You have to give it to the businesses, the people, the individuals, the companies, the homes that are looking after your elderly. So there's a little bit of there's quite a lot of politics there, but there's also quite a lot of confusion. I don't necessarily want to have a heated debate today. I just want to know what happened to you. That's all. Because the problem with subjects about which you know nothing until you need to know everything is that the people who know everything have forgotten what it's like to know nothing. So you're up to your ears in this. You can't believe that Mum's house is the money in the bank from the sale of Mum's house is just going down every month by £10,000, £2,000, whatever it is. You can't quite believe that there are people who know nothing about it. But you used to be someone who knew nothing about this, and now you're someone who knows everything. And that journey somehow robs you of the memory of what it was like to know nothing. Some people won't have a clue until it's pretty much the moment to go looking for a care home for Mum. They won't have a clue about the fact that they're going to have to sell Mum. They have a vague knowledge in the back of their mind, but they're going to have to sell Mum's house. And now, I think, and again, I make no apologies on this occasion for being entirely in your hands when it comes to knowledge and information, because nobody's perfect. I can't have a proper grasp and a deep understanding of every single subject that we talk about. In some ways, it's good because it hopefully will encourage you to share your insight. So the dementia tax was what did for Theresa May. Social care funding essentially saw a massive lead in the opinion polls dissipate after she called an early general election, to the point where she had to give £1 million to the DUP to keep a functioning majority in the House of Commons. Starmer flirted with it, I think, and backed down, as Starmer was wont to do. And Andy Burnham's gone all in, early doors, first big interview. NHS will collapse without social care reform. Nobody's got a clue what the social care reform would look like. But let's talk about what is in need of reform. What happens? That's it. And I know you're thinking, well, hang on, James must know what. I don't know. And even if I did know, there'll be hundreds of thousands of people listening to this programme who haven't got a clue. What happens? What actually happens? Make my eyes water. Make me wince. Tell me that you have spent on... Because some people have spent nothing, and that's why it's such a political hot potato. Why on earth should I pay anything when I am not going to need any of the benefits or any of the care that is being paid for by that tax or by that levy? Answer, same reason you pay for the NHS. Some people might go through their entire lives without having recourse to the NHS, without ever popping up in A&E, barely going to your doctors except to get your jabs before you go on holiday. Some people might live lives of untrammelled healthiness, but they still pay the same amount for the NHS as people who are in and out like a butcher's elbow. I want you to tell me what happens. What actually happens? Shock me, amaze me, delight me, amuse me. What actually happens when social care suddenly becomes the thing about which you knew nothing, and today you need to know everything? What did you discover? What do you wish is the key question? It was £1 billion she gave the DUP, not $1 million. My apologies. There you go. What's a zero between friends? What do you wish you'd known? That's all. What do you wish you'd known about an ordinary person's relationship with the social care system in this country? And if you want to then have a crack at how it might be successfully reformed, feel free. But before we can do that, what do you wish you had known? And what is likely to make the rest of us wince? 0345 6060 973. It's 10:21.
James O'Brien on LBC.
22 minutes after 10. So I told you I'd get confused. Some people are still sending in their bobs. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to rewind live radio and listen to the top of the show when we introduced an exciting new feature. And of course, some people are sending in 3 zeros in response to me suggesting that £1 billion was 1 zero more than it. It's a figure of speech. Come on, give me a break. So 3 zeros is not your score on the Bob, the Burnham Optimism Barometer. 3 zeros is you correcting my mathematics. There'll be quite a lot of mathematics, I suspect, in the actual conversation that we're having. And before that kicks off with Jane in Stockport, followed by Lisa in Liverpool, I have to tell you that Bill Oddie has passed away. Former goodie, latterly, of course, an incredibly popular and effective wildlife presenter. It's been announced in the last few minutes that Bill Oddie has died at the age of 85. His agent has just confirmed. And every time somebody in the public eye passes away on the programme, I'm struck by the fact that so much, well, your emotional response will depend entirely upon your relationship with their work. I mean, unless you're in the very rare position of knowing any of these people personally. So if you're my age, The Goodies was kind of the first grown-up comedy programme that made you laugh. It was so ridiculous and childish, but it was on at grown-up time. It was your parents were watching The Goodies. And Graham Gordon and Tim Brooke-Taylor, I think, came from very much a Footlights background. I could be wrong. I know that Graham Gordon was a doctor, and Bill Oddie was not from that background at all. It was an extraordinary combination of talents. I don't know who was responsible for putting them together. But The Goodies, Goody Gumdrops was just anarchic, incredible television. But you need to be roughly my age to have, or older, to have appreciated it, of course. Anybody younger may love him from his wildlife work, or his work may not have touched you much. But sometimes they get me. They get you, goody yum. They get, that's really sad. That's got me. That. The other thing you do, I don't know if you do this, I always think of my dad. My dad was 73 when he passed away, and if it's someone that I like, I kind of find myself going, oh, I'm glad you had a good innings. If it's someone I didn't like that much, I find myself going, oh, that's not fair. How come they got to live longer than Dad? So with Bill Oddie, I'm glad he had a good innings. It's 10:24. Let's get to social care, actually, speaking of age. Jane's in Stockport. Jane, what made you pick up the phone?
I think what made me pick up the phone is people's just general ignorance about the social care situation. I think they just assume that it's going to be like the NHS and you're going to be looked after. And I think, our family story is in no way extraordinary. I describe myself as being pretty typically middle class.
Yeah.
My mother was a maths teacher. My father was an engineer. They had 3 children. I'm their youngest. And Mum had 3 very typical conditions. She had a stroke. She fell and broke her hip. And she had dementia.
Right.
And she ended up in a care home for 8 years. She died this March. And at the time of her death, we were paying £6,000 a month for her care home. Not an atypical amount of money, so over £70,000 a year. So over the last 8 years of her life, we would have paid £600,000, something like that, in terms of care.
And when you say we, when
I say we. That's very selfish, isn't it? It was her money. Absolutely, it was her money.
No, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it like that. Just because I think you're better than me. I don't know how you managed to say in 2 minutes what took me 20 at the top of the show, but it's exactly that, isn't it? You think that it's just like. Because if, of course, she'd got a more obviously physical illness, if the dementia is the kicker here, because the treatment for stroke will be the NHS, but the aftercare and the social care, that doesn't kick in the way that NHS care does, and we just sort of blithely presume that it does. So do you get told that she has to sell her house? How does that bit work?
What happens is, she had savings, she had a pension,
right,
and it just gradually filters through to you that when all her money has gone, that you're going to have to sell her house. Now, we took the decision to sell her house because it was empty for a couple of years. She had a stroke.
Yes.
She lived at home successfully for many years, but then she fell and broke her hip. She could never mobilise again, and by that stage she already had dementia as well, which was an added complication, which meant she had to end up in a care home. And of course, if you've got over 23,000, it's down to you not only to find it, and the help in terms of finding a suitable care home was practically non-existent.
Tell me more. What do you mean? You were literally... I nean said getting out the yellow pages, Jane, but I don't think those days are behind us, are they? But it's the internet.
That is almost it, James. So, the hilarious thing is Age UK were given the contract in Stockport for helping, the social care contract in Stockport for helping families find care. So these are people, let's be clear here, these are people that are bed blocking. My mother was bed blocking at this point. And, she's a lady in her late 80s with dementia. And what happens is, instead of phoning me, her next of kin, they visit her at her bedside. 3 days later, I'm, tidying up at her table, and I find this pack of paper. And what's this? I read it. And it's from Age UK, and it's a list of care homes with availability that might be suitable for my mum. Well, I knew nothing about this.
And she was not... fully compost mentis at the time herself, so wouldn't have...
No.
Oh, my days.
Yeah, so she'd forgotten, have a conversation with her. 10 minutes later, she won't remember you've had the conversation. And this is the farce of the whole situation. There's very little communication. It really is down to you. I'm quite a sort of go-getter. I get out there and get stuff done. So, I was able to pick it up and run with it and go and visit care homes.
But there'll be lots of people. Some people might not have daughters or sons.
No.
They might not have anybody looking after them. They might be on their own. I mean, it's beyond a lottery. I don't know if there's a word big enough to describe how utterly kind of inconsistent the scenario is. And if your mum hadn't had savings and a pension and indeed a home that could be sold, what would have happened to her? Would she have gone to a different home?
I think then social services would have stepped in, because then the responsibility, she would have ended up with a social worker, and they would have found somewhere. I have to say, the only silver lining in all of this for me is, if you have money, you then get a choice, don't you?
Yeah,
so we were able
always.
to choose a care home.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, Mum slipped out of bed and broke her wrist while she was in the care home. And I mean, not the care home's fault. The care home was superb. They were an excellent care home. But anyway, we had to go to hospital and all the rest of it. And we had hospital transport back to the home because, the hospital kind enough to arrange that. And so we did a sort of round robin of various different care homes dropping people off. And Mum was last on the list. And of course, all the professionals, the ambulance drivers, the team there, they know all these homes, just as the district nurses do.
Yes.
And we stopped at the second to last one, and it looked bleak. It looked really bleak. And when the carer got back in, the ambulance driver, I said, that place doesn't look very good. And he just looked at me and went, yeah, your mum's in a good one, and though that one is terrible. And I thought, well, at least we have the choice. Some people don't have any choice at all.
And that is, why I don't know what you feel about it, but the idea that everybody should be paying, even though it was only going to be accessed by some people, would raise all the boats in the harbour, wouldn't it? You wouldn't. It
would. Can I also be clear, James? I think people.
You're very late for the news, Jane. I don't know if you've ever done this before,
sorry.
but it's horribly unprofessional. Carry on.
Sorry. There've been all these commissions and studies and stuff, and they all seem to say the same thing, which is there should be a cap on the cost, which I think is right. But I'm very clear. I'm not expecting for someone to pay to keep a roof over my head and something for me to eat. So I think absolutely people should be asked to pay for the bed and board element of their care.
But not the care element. And so then it becomes like private health. So if you want to have, well, I don't know, I mean, I've got to show my age a bit. If you want to have Sky TV and prawn sandwiches, you can pay extra for a private room in hospital, even though the level of medical care that you're going to get isn't going to be vastly different. So there is, why very bad question this, really, from me, because I should have answers and opinions on this subject. Why is it such a hot potato? Is it just because people object to the idea of paying for something they won't themselves necessarily need?
I think it's partly that, but also I think it's general ignorance, and I don't mean that in a cruel way. It's just that people are unaware of it until it hits them. And then, of course, it's a lottery. You might have somebody that perhaps needs help for maybe only a few months at their end of their life. I think Mum was particularly lucky in her situation in needing such long-term care. It's the people that have to have that degree of care and help for an extended period at the end of their life where it is really tough.
You see £600,000 move across the counter, as it were, and other people will see a fraction of that, or less. Some people will see more, and yet everyone is on their own, really, and they're bobbing around in the sea in their own little boat. There's very, very little sense of cohesion or community, or, given that it's called social care, society. I mean, listen, Jane's provided a brilliant introduction to the subject, so we can probably add to the list now. The question of what on earth would reform look like? What do we even know what solutions would look like beyond a cap? Because at the moment there is no limit. If you can have £10 million in the bank. You need social care for 30 years for whatever reason. Everybody lives longer these days. It's all gone. And then somebody over the road who reaches the buffers with tuppence halfpenny in the bank, they pay nothing. They get less care, less pleasant care, less fragrant and salubrious care, but they pay nothing for it. I don't know. I really don't know. I can't think of another subject where I feel so intellectually incapable for that reason that we highlight. You know nothing about this until you need to know everything. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:36 and it shows what I know. A little bit of inverse snobbery, I think, perhaps, when I suggested that Bill Oddie hadn't been in the footlights at Cambridge with Graham Garden and Tim Brooke-Taylor. Indeed he was. I also didn't know, and if you're just joining us, Bill Oddie has passed away. It's been announced this morning. He grew up in my neck of the woods. I just didn't know that. Hales Owen, just up the road from where I grew up, and then he went to King Edward School in Birmingham. I suppose because he wasn't a very obviously sort of public school type, I thought he hadn't gone to Cambridge and joined the Footlights, and ended up being put together with Graham Garden and Tim Brooke-Taylor by a sort of clever Washington comedy producer. 'Twas not the case. There's quite a crossover, between the Goodies and that group of comedians and Monty Python. There's a lot of the same with the David Frost stuff. There was quite a lot of crossover. People working out who got on with who and what the chemistry was and which shows would work and which combinations would work, and a little bit of alchemy involved there, which reminds me that Eric Idle is coming on Full Disclosure soon. Stay tuned to find out more. 10:37 is the time. Back to social care. Stay with this. We may stay with this for more than an hour. It just feels mad. I genuinely, it feels almost insurmountably complicated. For example, I could not tell you, and remember what I do for a living, I couldn't tell you why it is so politically contentious. It did for Theresa May at the polls. They called an early election, streets ahead in the opinion polls. They announced something that became known as the dementia tax, and she almost lost to Jeremy Corbyn. Or at least she saw her majority massively reduced, making her incredibly vulnerable to Boris Johnson's vanity and ambition. I could not tell you, because I'm guilty of not knowing anything about it until I suddenly need to know everything, and I don't suddenly need to know everything. But politically, apart from the sheer complexity and scale of the problem, I couldn't tell you why it was such a political hot potato. Is it one of those things where every solution will be unpopular? And I don't know if we ever lived in an era, or indeed in a country, where governments could be paternalistic and say, short-term pain, long-term gain. No one's going to like this in the short term, but you're going to have to trust nanny. You're going to have to trust matron. Everything will get better in the long term. We can't really do things like that anymore. I suppose Margaret Thatcher tried to, in her own mind, with the poll tax, and that did for her. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud. Which is just as well, really, because for a radio presenter to think in silence would be a very, very odd departure from the norm. Deborah's in Sidcup. Deborah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Deborah.
I've spoken to you before, but still a bit nervous, but this is a subject really close to my heart.
Yeah, go on.
My mum had dementia and was in a care home, and she sold her home, and the money ran out.
What happened when it ran out, if you don't
Well, they wanted to move her to another care home. We looked at the other care home.
Forgive me for interrupting, but remember, I know nothing, and you know
Sorry,
everything.
the council.
So the council is in
they wouldn't pay
charge.
for her to stay where she was.
Right,
yeah.
okay.
So we looked at care homes that were nowhere near.
Oh, how traumatic for you all. How horrible for you all.
Well, we're now... My mum passed in April.
I'm sorry.
We did cause a fuss, and
Yes.
for the remaining few months, she was allowed to stay where she was. I'm now in exactly the same position, excuse me,
That's all right.
with my husband.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's in a care home with advanced dementia.
Okay.
We sold our house, and I went somewhere much smaller, moved away.
Did you have to do that? Were you required to do that, even if you were still in the house? Forgive my ignorance.
James, if he was to have we were deemed to pay. I didn't really have a choice, because if we had to pay, there wasn't enough money outside of the house to pay for where we wanted him to go, where he'd been to respite and where he'd been well cared for in respite.
So you wanted him somewhere that you felt happier?
Yes, and he paid for the house the same as I had. He was entitled to that money. He was entitled to that money. We are now at the point where, as a family, we are wrecked with worry, because we're reaching the same position again. In a year, the money is going to run out. And I'm taking a sleeping tablet every night, because if I wake up at 3, all I do for the remaining hours is turn over in my head how long the money will last, what we will do when it doesn't last. And it's horrific. It's horrific. If you're dealing with a young one, loved one who is in this position, it's awful. I go in there and he doesn't know who I am sometimes.
Oh,
He's
Deborah.
very distressed.
I'm sorry.
And then you have on top of it the financial worry.
Which is huge.
It's huge. It's awful. I cannot tell you how dreadful it is. And something needs to be done, because I'm not in good health with worry. I have counselling. My daughter's the same. It's wrecked our family. It's wrecking our family. Twice it's wrecked our family.
I suppose politically, and doesn't that feel like an inadequate word when we're talking about your life in this way, but politically and historically, so few people have found themselves in precisely your position that it hasn't garnered the political salience. It hasn't become a big political issue in the way that it would do if, for example, huge numbers of families were in the same position that you're in, because it's so obviously unjust and unfair and unsustainable.
It is. And also, we don't begrudge the money. I don't begrudge the money. I'm not asking not to pay. All I'm asking is that when we've paid all we have, He's allowed to stay where he is.
Oh, Deborah, can I ask a couple of questions? Are you going to be all right, or shall we?
Yeah. No, I'm used to this.
I know you are. I know you are. So what do we know about where he, or your mum, if you're more comfortable talking about your mum, what do we know about where they would go to save some money when you're no longer picking up the bills yourself?
The places we looked at with Mum, because obviously I haven't had to look at places for my husband yet, but places we looked at for Mum, as the previous lady said, were so different. And I'm not talking about bells and whistles, I'm not. No. We went to one and we spoke to a lady about safeguarding.
Yes.
And she said, oh, yes, we always keep the front door shut.
Right.
Well, another one we went to, and there was an elderly lady, quite frail, walking down a staff staircase on her own, and they said, well, we don't know how she got in there.
Oh, Lord. And this is when supposedly they'd be on their best behaviour because they've got potential clients coming round.
Well, you would have thought so, yes. Yeah. And I'm not blaming these homes at all.
No, I know you're not.
I'm not blaming them, and I'm not blaming the staff, because the people in there are doing the best they can under really, really difficult circumstances. But it's like a nightmare you just can't get out of. And
you want your loved ones to be in the best possible space, and we can't.
The place that actually becomes their home.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we'd rather he came home here. He can't. He has advanced dementia. He has Parkinson's. He's doubly incontinent. He's immobile. He cannot be here. We cannot care for him. So he's in a place where he's well cared for, but he also thinks of it as his home.
Yeah.
And it's like being evicted. It's like evicting a sick old person, frankly, at the end.
And maybe I'm being naive when I say if that was happening all the time to lots and lots of people, it would have a sense of urgency to it that seems to me to be lacking. But maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe we're just not looking at it because it's so complicated. Do you understand why it's such a contentious political issue? Is it because they'd have to find the money to pay for your husband's care from somewhere?
I know they do.
And it would come, I just to think out loud, forgive me, you know what I'm like when I've got a bee in my bonnet. So the argument would be that some of the people in the less pleasant places will have paid taxes all their lives, albeit that they've ended up with no savings or assets. And those taxes would then be used to help keep your husband in a place that's nicer than where they are.
Well, yes, I suppose so. But as I say, we've paid our taxes.
I know. I'm just thinking out loud,
we're willing
Deborah.
to pay everything else we have, everything we can liquidate.
But you worry you might still run out.
Oh, definitely I worry about it. I worry about it every single... There's not a minute of the day when that bit of that hamster wheel is not going round in my head.
Oh, dear. And there's no way you can... I mean, you've mentioned counselling, but in terms of actual substantive improvements, things that would take these worries away, I hesitate to say...
All that basically does is keep me from going under. It keeps me treading water because it can't solve the problem. It can't stop me from... But I dread to think where I'd be without that. I would drown without that.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I know it's scant consolation just to point out that you've got each other and your daughter is obviously suffering like you are, but like all parents, you don't want your children to be suffering any more than you want your husband to be in a vulnerable position.
No. And I wish I'd had a time machine because you just don't... I mean, back years ago, I didn't assume my mum would get dementia, and I certainly didn't assume my husband. But if I could go back and there was a dementia tax, by Lord, I'd pay into it just to save myself this grief at the end.
Do we know why it's so? When Theresa May suggested that we all do that, do we know why it was so politically...
I think because people think it won't happen to me, or it's so
they're
far
taking
down the
more
line.
money. So Kemi Bader not already saying, well, I won't support it if it involves a tax rise. So where on earth is this money going to come from?
To be frank, Kemi Bader won't have to worry because the chances are the money won't run out for her or her loved ones.
I don't know. But I guess that is one of the reasons why certain people of certain political persuasions don't.
But in general, people say it won't. Either won't happen or it's so far. Believe me, though, if that train is coming for you, it comes down the track so fast.
And that's clear, and you've done an incredible job of communicating that. I'm just looking at some numbers while you're talking, and so it's about 9% of the population have dementia. That's obviously a gradient, isn't it? So it is going to be relatively small numbers of people that potentially find themselves in the situation that you find yourself in. But
I'm glad, because I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy.
You're a lovely person, Deborah. It's really shining out of the radio. You're going to set me off in a minute, because you really don't deserve any of this.
I don't think that's possible.
I'm not as tough as I sound sometimes, but you really don't deserve any of this, and I'm so sorry that you're going through it. But you are living proof of what I said about knowing nothing about it until you suddenly need to know everything.
Yeah.
And you'd rather not know all this stuff. I mean, that's obvious, because you've had to live it. I hope, that something comes up, but I sound like Mr. McCorber. That will be part of it. One in 3 people born today will develop it in their lifetime, because we are living so much longer. But it's about 1 in 11 people over the age of 65 who have it now. So that's about 11% of it in the States. So around the 10% mark. If it was 25, 30... be a much bigger issue than it is now. And how on earth, if we bring the politics into it now, how on earth are we going to find the money to look after people like Deborah's husband if we don't actually increase the amount of money that we take off everybody in expectation, like a kind of collective life insurance or dementia insurance? It's a funny old world, isn't it? How would it have worked for Theresa May if they'd managed to get it described as dementia insurance in the tabloid press rather than dementia tax? I don't know. And obviously she was a Tory, so God knows what would happen if a Labour politician came up with something similar. But it's dementia insurance. There's a 1 in 10 chance that you will get dementia. So every month you will pay X pounds to look after everybody who gets dementia later in life, on top of the taxes that go to the NHS. And so you just call it dementia? I mean, that's far too simple and straightforward, isn't it? And I know that Kemi Badenoch's already ruled out any increases in taxes, but, she's not in charge. She can jog on. And I didn't want to say this in front of Deborah, because I know this is the thing that keeps her awake at night. There's not going to be anything left if she ever finds herself in need of the sort of care that her husband is currently receiving. Could be you. It's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I told you this is something of a Pandora's box. You take the lid off and you can't control what is inside, what comes out. I mean, here's another stupid question for you. Do we know why it's so expensive? There was an awful lot of concern at one point about the way that private equity has moved into social care, children's homes in particular. I've had some terrible personal experiences with this involving kids I'm very, very close to who need full-time care, and one of their homes shut down pretty much without any warning whatsoever. And Private Eye did a report on it, and it turned out that the private equity owners of the space were behaving in ways that you would expect private equity companies to behave, but not children's homes to behave. Do we know why it's so expensive? Why it's £6,000 a month? And where, forgive me, but I want to know where the savings are made. So if you go from, staffing levels would be the most obvious thing, but presumably there's a legal minimum. It was Deborah's story, wasn't it, of the lady on the stairs and the staff saying, we've got no idea how she got there. So the most obvious thing you'd say is that you are at more risk if there are not more staff. But the other stuff will be decor, will it? I remember going to see my wife's grandfather when we were still courting, and the home that he was in, and just, it wasn't unpleasant, but it certainly wasn't luxurious, and there will be things like how quickly spillages are cleaned up, and staffing levels are going to affect everything. Do we know why it is so expensive? Prisoners work out about $5,000 a month. It's almost more than Eton College. Maybe that's a stupid question. Lisa's in Liverpool. Lisa, what made you pick up the phone?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
Thanks for listening. Essentially, my dad is riddled with Parkinson's. A year ago, my mum died of metastases, and it might sound a little odd, but she was actually his primary carer.
Okay.
So obviously she died, and we were thrown into tremendous grief, but also faced with this big issue around Dad because his Parkinson's was already advanced.
Right.
Anyway, there was nothing, absolutely nothing in the way of support or guidance with regards to how to navigate this situation. We literally just had to almost make it up as we went along. To begin with, we got 4 carers a day, 4 carers a day into Dad. That's the maximum you can actually have.
So he's always got someone with him, has he? Or do they come in and out of the house?
No. If only.
I told you I was ignorant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, 4 carers a day and, 15, 20 minutes a time.
Right, so 4 visits.
And that was costing over £500 a week. His money, I should say. That wasn't funded by us. He was funding it, but that was over £500 a week.
Okay.
Anyway, he was deteriorating. He was clearly deteriorating. We set his bungalow up with all the mod cons, if you like, the panic alarms, rails. We got occupational health in to essentially advise, is there anything else we can do in this setting? And no was the answer. So that was as safe as it was going to get for him. Right. Anyway, in November, he fell in the middle of the night. My brother lives just 5 minutes walk away from him, I should say. Yeah. But he fell in the middle of the night. He'd got a panic alarm. He wasn't wearing it. So, of course, he didn't alert the panic emergency situation. And the first person to see him in the morning was the carer, by which time he had 3rd-degree burns.
Oh, no.
And he was whipped into a specialised burns unit where he was for 2.5 months. Because he had to have skin grafts, he almost died, he got pneumonia, the works. He was a very, very, very ill man. Of course, again, this is all on the back end of our mother quite recently having passed away.
Yeah.
He was in the burns unit for 2.5 months, went into a sort of a rehab hospital type facility. By now, of course, my brother and I were of the opinion that there's just no way he can stay on his own, just no way. He's not safe. But, and this is a quirk of the law, I realise this isn't necessarily anything to do with this conversation as such, but the law states if the individual has capacity and they want to stay at home, it doesn't matter if they can't walk, it doesn't matter if they can't really look after themselves, then they are allowed to stay at home. Anyway, we were offered 6 weeks respite in this
So he
hospital.
wants to stay at home, does he? So because his condition is physical rather than involving mental decline, he has capacity, and if he says he wants to stay at home, there's not a great deal you can do about it.
There is literally nothing. As family,
so he's quite a strong-willed man, and all the conversations.
He was
right.
he was not so much now, but he was.
Of course.
Anyway, the rehab facility, we were supposed to have 6 weeks, kicked him out after 2 weeks. We were hoping to have that time to plan.
Wow.
To have the conversations with him, to get him to understand that, Dad, this is not sustainable. Yeah. This is not safe. We can't carry on like this. We need to find somewhere for you to live that is far safer. Yes. But, of course, that was taken away from us because he was kicked out within 2 weeks.
Did they tell you why?
Because as far as they were concerned, there's nothing more that they could do. Right. The whole idea in the facility was to get him stronger after having this horrific 2.5 months.
Phone line's falling apart. It's typical. I don't want to give up yet. Let's try once again just to get to the. No, we're gonna to the end of that story. Just in terms of wondering what's happened to her dad. We can come back after the news. I don't think I want to move on, but I tell you what I do want to do. I want to nudge it into the political now. Listen, I sometimes worry that you think I'm exaggerating when I tell you how stupid I am, but I promise you I'm not. There are some things I just haven't got my head around. And I was reading up this morning before we came on air. I'll tell you exactly what I was reading because I've got it in front of me. It's a 9-year-old article by Philip Inman in The Guardian about the social care funding and, quotes, dementia tax that Theresa May introduced. And I've read it twice, and I'm still not 100% sure on why this is such a political hot potato. So we'll move into that next as well.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11, and I don't know why Theresa May's proposal was so unpopular. I do know that Dan Needle, the tax expert who very rarely pokes his head above the public parapet without saying something incredibly interesting and helpful. He has pointed out in a very lengthy thread, which I think has been collated on his website, taxpolicy.org, he has pointed out that Theresa May actually deserves a lot more credit for trying to come up with a half-decent idea. She tried to do the right thing, but what did she try to do? Because if I look up why was it so unpopular, then I'm reading about people who receive home care or residential care will have to pay for it using their properties and savings and assets, provided they kept £100,000. And I thought that was what was going on now, except that the threshold was £23,000. So I really mean it when I say, I know you sometimes think I'm exaggerating when I tell you how stupid I am, but I do not understand this. And you might want to argue that I should get my head around it before I come on the radio, but I haven't. And the phone lines are open. 0345 6060 973. Is it as simple as this? One Tory leader says we need to raise more money, and another Tory leader, as in Kemi Badenoch this morning, has said, oh, no, you don't. Because when we did this on the phones, and I just checked with some colleagues during the break, because I can't really remember this. There was a week I was on holiday once when Jeremy Hunt and Wes Streeting both did the show. So you had the Health Secretary and the Shadow Health Secretary. So if there was something in our collective memory banks that looks like a neat and easy answer to this, I'd remember it, or we'd remember it collectively as a team. But we've got a memory of lots of what you might call boomer Tories having a fit of the vapours about Theresa May's proposal. That's what did for her. So it would be sort of Telegraph, Daily Mail led. And Johnson, of course, lied about having a plan. Do you remember? I'm not dreaming that, am I? Didn't Boris Johnson say he had a plan that was good to go? The minute he got into Downing Street, he'd be able to implement his social care plan, and then he got into Downing Street and we never heard hide nor hair of it again. God, it's so easy to forget how awful he was, isn't it? But why? Why? So I want to get onto that, but I just want to give Lisa a chance. We've tried with the phone line, but it's one of those... we're in the lap of the gods on this. So your dad was back at home and you hadn't had the chance to make arrangements for him because he came out of the rehab a month before you were expecting him to, Lisa. What happened next?
Exactly. So he was at home for 2.5 weeks. He had numerous falls in and out of hospital, and there's a cost to that. This is what's crazy. The cost of the hospital stays set against the tax doesn't make sense. But anyway, eventually we got him to agree to respite, and he's now in a care home. The care home is costing £7,500 a month. And don't get me wrong, we do not resent it's a nice place. It's certainly not palatial. It is certainly not palatial.
Where's the money coming from?
He's funding, self-funding.
Right.
He sold that. The house is sold.
Right, okay.
The family house is sold.
Yes.
And so he's paying it himself. And that's where we're at. And I think that the infuriating thing for myself and my brother, there was no one to talk with that could guide us through this process. No one at all. We were just left to try and, as I say, make it up ourselves, really. And when you've just lost your mum, you're not in the best place to start doing all of this. The second thing is, because he has Parkinson's, not every home will accept somebody with Parkinson's. So, of course, that limited the pool that we could explore. And then finally, and genuinely, James, my brother and I do not want any kind of inheritance from our father. Neither of us need it. We're fine. That said, I look at him in the care home and I think, my days, or he was never a rich man. He wasn't a poor man. He wasn't a rich man. He worked all of his life, the usual story. He thankfully never needed to draw on welfare or whatever. Thankfully, I realise that's a gift in and of itself. But I look at him now and I think this is just so wrong that there was nothing in place to help you when you needed it.
Well, there would have been.
Finally at a stage.
No, there wouldn't have been. Because he's got. So, but if he didn't have any assets, he wouldn't have been sort of.
Yes.
Locked in a cupboard somewhere. They'd have found. So if he had less than £23,000 to his name, they would have found somewhere less.
Well, that's true.
Pleasant for him.
That is true.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm thinking out loud. I'm not correcting you or criticising you. I'm just trying to work out what the score is for everybody. And if you didn't have £7,500 a month, then he would have ended up somewhere even less palatial than the place that he's ended up.
Well, I mean, so I'm told on the one hand, but then on the other hand, I know there are people at his home, and again, I do not begrudge this for those people. But there are people in the home that he's in that aren't self-funding, didn't have the assets, and so essentially they have a slightly less pleasant room.
So it's like being in a hospital that's got private wards and public wards.
Yeah, kind of.
You pay for a private room. So that's, I mean, and do you know, you're a lovely person. Everyone who's called me today sounds so nice, and it breaks my heart that we're all at pains to prove that we're not Daily Mail commenters.
Genuinely not.
But do you know what I mean? It's like you do it and Deborah did it and I think Jane in Stockport did it. You're sort of saying, look, I understand life is a lottery. I understand fairness and unfairness. I don't think that I scored a hat-trick because I was born 3-0. My dad's got $7,500 a month, and I appreciate that there's going to be people who work just as hard as he did for all their lives and end up without a pot to pee in at the end of it. But I wonder whether the reason why it is politically contentious, Lisa, is because so many people think that they've got money at the end of their life as a consequence of having been wise and clever and hard-working, rather than just as a consequence of spinning the wheel and getting a little bit luckier than other people. And then you spin the wheel again and you end up with or without Parkinson's or with or without dementia. But everybody clings to the notion that somehow it's all about actions and consequences when it's just the fickle finger of fate, isn't it? Do we know why it's so expensive? Do we know why? Sorry, go on.
I've no idea. I genuinely have no idea. And when I visit, I say again, the staff are lovely.
Yes.
I am not criticising that in the slightest.
I know you're not.
But I look around and I think, well, you know what? It's not like it's the furnishings are plush. It's not like his room is plush.
No.
It's functional and it's clean and it's got a window onto a garden. But it's not 5-star hotel standard care home for £7,500.
No, I hear you. And there will be reasons for that are obvious, like the fact that it's 24-hour care and it's there are things that are way beyond what you'd get in a hotel and things like that. But there are some reasons that are not obvious. Do you know why it's so contentious politically? What's your one-sentence answer to that question? I
think, one, some of the other callers have covered this. One, it seems so far down the road for a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, and they're looking at their parents, as I did when my parents were in their 50s, never imagining them as very old people with issues.
Yeah.
So I think there's that issue. I genuinely understand that there are so many people that are counting the pennies just to pay for the lecky, and hence the very idea that they've got to cough up with another however much towards very old people that have nothing to do with them, that galls a little. And I don't think that's right, but I understand that as a reason. Also, I think at the moment, you know, there's all this talk around triple lock and older people having it easy, and I wish I'd got your money at the age of 30 that you've got at 80 and all that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And again, I know those arguments are very valid in many respects, and they come from a place where young people are truly struggling. I think a lot of it is just born out of this setting one group of people against another group of people, instead of realising that none of us are going to get out of this thing alive. Let's try and do the best for each of us, you know?
It'll never catch on, but you're inspiring. Thank you, Lisa. And she's right, of course. And that's why I do wonder whether you can manage to somehow get the word insurance into the public conversation rather than, for example, the word tax. And it creates a different feeling, because that's what Lisa is describing. It's what I'm asking when we talk about political contentiousness. Is it as simple as that? Is it just that, you know, as Cami Badenoch has very helpfully demonstrated today, some people refuse to accept that you need to pay for the provision of care, and there is a relatively good chance that you won't need it, so why the hell should you pay for it? You know that play at the National Theatre that Michael Sheen was in? What was it called? Was it called Nye? So the life story of Anaya in Bevan. My mum met Anaya in Bevan, you know. My granddad was a great trades unionist. I never met him in the Sheffield Steelworks, and he'd take her to public meetings and to see political figures speak, and she saw Nye Bevan speak at a hotel in Sheffield. And I didn't know until I watched that play. I kind of had it filed away in the back of my mind from doing a politics A-level. A huge resistance to the formation of the NHS, presumably for the same reasons. Presumably because, well, why should I pay? I'm not ill. Am I being simplistic or just wrong? So Badenoch writes a letter saying, well, we can't possibly increase taxes. I absolutely refuse to increase. So how are you going to pay for all the new stuff? well, we'll take it all off disabled people or kids with anxiety. Well, bad news. 51% of the, or 49%, it's almost the infernal ratio. 49% of the social care budget goes on working age adults. So, people who need care, either residential care or care in their own homes, half of the budget, half of the £21.4 billion budget goes on working age adults. And of course, these figures are going to change as we live longer and longer and longer. And the working age adults, of course, migrate into or graduate into the 65 and over category. So, only part of the problems that we're discussing are going to be addressed, let alone solved, by focusing on old people. I go to Lauren in East Grinstead next, and then hopefully, and I'll do that after the break, because I want to read you this. You can just bear with me, all right? This is, and it's not my work. I wish it was. It's brilliant. This is Dan Needle from Tax Policy Associates, who describes himself, of course, famously as a tax realist, and he knows his stuff. He's tried to do an allegory, all right? And you know how much we love allegories because they sometimes make complicated subjects a little bit easier to understand. I'm going to read you the first line of the allegory, and then we'll go to a break, and then I'll read you the rest of it. It's your 65th birthday, right? So this is what we all do. On your 65th birthday, you shuffle a deck and... Actually, no, I'm going to start at the very, very beginning. I have a modest proposal for a new tax. It involves a deck of cards and a monkey throwing darts. A modest proposal for a new tax that involves a deck of cards and a monkey throwing darts. After this, I will explain to you, or rather Dan Needle will explain to you, why that is a pretty accurate description of social care funding and provision in England today.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Monkeys have pretty good hand-to-eye coordination. That writes Ron. If they got a banana every time they hit a bullseye, they'd probably get pretty good at darts. You've almost preempted a topic I wanted to do on the programme, Ron, but I've decided not to. The more I watch Luke Littler, the more I wonder whether he is going to surpass Muhammad Ali as the greatest sportsman of all time, which is odd, given that Muhammad Ali was such an extraordinary specimen of humanity. And Luke Littler, and I make no bones or criticism about this because I'm not exactly an oil painting myself, he looks like he's fallen out of a kebab shop in the last 20 minutes. And according to what I've read about his diet, it's perfectly possible that he has, and fair play to him. But the standard of darts that he plays and the way that he is continuing, I think everyone was expecting a wobble, just continuing to see off all comers, makes me wonder whether it is, because darts is just throwing arrows at a board, but what is football if not just banging a bladder around a field with your feet? Is it fair to suggest that Luke Littler could become a more complete sporting triumph than Lionel Messi, Muhammad Ali and Novak Djokovic combined? He is going to dominate his sports in the ways that those other sports people can only dream of. But then Ron, on a completely different subject, sends in a message saying monkeys have pretty good hand-to-eye coordination. If they got a banana every time they hit a bullseye, they'd probably get pretty good at darts too. And I wonder whether actually the snobs are right and that darts doesn't deserve to be spoken of in the same breath as all the other sports I just spoke of. Most obviously tennis, football and boxing. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about this. I have a modest proposal for a new tax. It involves a deck of cards and a monkey throwing darts. Here are the rules, right? Pay attention. Because if, like me, you are blissfully ignorant of what might be on the horizon, either for you or for your loved ones, this is the situation in England. And because we've carried this on for a second hour, we can actually recognise the fact this is unique to England. And if you're in Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, you give us a ring and tell us what's going on where you are and what we can learn from you. On your 65th birthday, you shuffle a deck of cards and draw one. If it's an ace or a king, congratulations. One day you will pay my new tax. Any other card and you will never pay a penny of it. You're not told when. The tax might start when you're 68, it might start when you're 95, it might start the week after your wife dies. I know, but you don't. There's no way to find out in advance, and there's no way to insure against it. An official decides whether to give you a wild card that will exempt you from the tax. Some officials hand out wild cards 3% of the time, others 60%. A wild card means you're exempt from the tax. You don't have to pay it. If you don't get a wild card, it's time to pay. At which point a monkey throws a dart with your name on it at a board full of numbers. It lands somewhere between 58,000 and 68,000, and that's your tax bill for that year. We've spoken to people like that. If you're paying £7,000 a month, £6,000 a month, it's in excess of 66,000. That's your tax bill for the year. Monkey's thrown a dart. It's hit the number. That's what you have to pay. Half of all players are finished inside 15 months. You don't need me to explain why. But for more than a quarter, and this is all of our callers today, you keep spinning for over 3 years and sometimes more than 20. Every year, the monkey throws a new dart and you get a new bill. If your income won't cover the tax, and it probably won't, you have to sell stuff to fund it. If you've got under £14,250 worth of assets, your council pays this tax instead of you, which of course goes on to everybody's council tax. If you've got between 14 and 23 and a bit, you pay £1 a week for every £250 you have over 14,250. Are you still with me at the back? I told you it was complicated. The council pays the rest. If you've got over £23,250, you pay the whole of the monkey's number yourself every year until you die. That's the system in England. Why is it so impossible politically to fix it? I don't know. Dan Needle then injects some socialism into the randomness. 30% of the tax is paid by rich losers who are paying in full, goes to the people who also lost but don't have enough income or assets to pay for themselves. Your house is in play. It doesn't count as an asset while you, your partner or an elderly relative still lives in it, but once you've all moved out, you get 12 weeks and then it's part of your assets. You may lose almost everything you have ever owned, at which point you get £31.80 a week to live on, so don't spend it all at once. And that is exactly how catastrophic adult social care costs work in England today. People who win the game or who haven't played also lose because adult social care now dominates many council budgets. And Theresa May had a crack at fixing it, and it pretty much wrote her political death warrant. And I don't understand the politics. I don't understand why, except that Kemi Badenoch's already insisting that they can't raise taxes to find the money that's so obviously needed, in which case they can't find the money, if you subscribe to her politics. I don't know. Lauren's in East Grinstead. Lauren, what made you pick up the phone?
Good morning. I was ringing really to highlight the difference between my mum and her sister, who both lived to a ripe old age, no longer with us. But my mother lived independently until she was in her 90s. Then she had a stroke and went into hospital. Then it was decided that she couldn't go back home. She was living 60 miles away from me.
Right. She
couldn't go back home and live independently. So the social worker who was assigned to her said, you need to find her a care home.
Okay.
And so then he couldn't help me because he didn't know my locality. So I searched up and found...
Because you wanted one near you, not near where she lived.
To move mum to be nearer to me,
yes.
So I could sort of pop in, which I did. But just finding one, I mean, what an eye-opener. It was the most stressful time. And I said to your colleague, I mean, I went into one place, and as soon as I walked in, I thought, I wouldn't kennel my dog in here. And that had a good CQC rating.
Right.
It was awful. It was so grim.
Why? How? Tell me more.
Well, for a start, it stank as soon as you walked in.
Of wee-wee.
Of wee.
Yeah.
Not to put, yeah.
No, I was going to say that earlier, but I chose not to. But I'm glad you have. Go on.
And then I was shown into a big conservatory, very big conservatory, where all the chairs with the residents were pushed back against the walls. And there wasn't a TV on, there wasn't a radio on. They were just sat, not even in groups. They were just sat against the wall. And then we went to look at the room. The rooms all had vinyl floors, and I was told that they had a good CQC rating because of the vinyl floors. Yeah. So there was nothing homely about it. And there was room after room after room of very, very elderly people who were just staring at the ceiling. It was just awful. And there were other places that were better.
Mm.
But anyway, and then while Mum was still in hospital and I was still looking, I had a call from the bed manager who said to me, have you found a place for your mother yet? Because she has been in hospital for some time. And I said, well, it's only been a week since I was told, that she'd find her home. And, well, she has been in here for some time. And I just said, no, she hasn't. I'm doing my best here to find somewhere. And eventually we did find a place, and it was very good. The place where she was costs about, in this area, £1,800 to £2,000 a week.
Okay.
A week.
Wow.
Now, she had a little bungalow.
Yes.
It would seem that the local authorities will only pay up to a certain amount, and if you want anywhere better than what their money would pay for, you have to subsidise it, which we did through selling her bungalow.
Mm.
So she was one of the people who, had to fund her own.
Yes, because she had assets.
It was because she had assets. But interestingly, I was told that certain assets are counted and certain assets are not. So if you have some very valuable jewellery or a very, very valuable painting, those things are not included. So, but if you try and hide any assets, so for example, if you spend some cash on a car or you give it away to your children or whatever, grandchildren, nieces, that will be discovered, and you would,
I think there's a 7-year thing as well. So that
I don't think that's.
Well, that's inheritance tax, isn't it? If you pass away less than 7 years after giving somebody some money, it becomes eligible for inheritance tax as well.
I'm not even sure if that's right. But
what happened with your aunt?
You can't hide. Sorry?
What happened with your aunt?
Well, my aunt had rented, so she didn't own her own home. So she went into a local authority, she was paid for by the local authority, into a very, very similar care home, but that was actually fully funded by the local authority. And that's just how it is. I mean, I fully expect myself for my home to be my, be my care home when the time comes.
What is this? Do you feel that there was an unfairness attached to the fact that your mum paid for the same provision that your aunt didn't pay for?
I don't feel any resentment about it because.
But do you think other people do? Because I'm trying to work out the motivation of the callers to LBC when they are adamant. And to be fair, I haven't invited them to ring in today, but when they're adamant that Theresa May's proposals, that Kemi Badenoch's writing letters saying taxes cannot go up, but which means things will stay exactly as they are. Is there a sense that there's something, because it's your aunt, so you're not going to chalk her up as a lifelong malingerer who spent all her money on flat screen TVs and Benson and Hedges?
As well, for the future, I mean, more people now seem to be renting and buying homes. So I mean, looking towards the future,
exactly.
There's not going to be so many homes to sell to fund later life care. So
but do you understand why it's so politically fraught, this subject? Is it because of your mum and your aunt? Not specifically, but with them being an example.
I think so. I think there's a perception that it's not fair that some people pay and some people don't.
So I'm being punished for working hard. I'm being punished for saving. I'm being punished for being careful.
I don't really think that. I mean, I just think I'm fortunate.
No, I know. I'm putting words into someone else's mouth, not yours, for heaven's sake, Lauren. Keep up, will you? Honestly. But that's where it's coming from. It is that
there is that perception, and one of the things I don't understand is that years ago, there were more local authority homes around. My aunt's home was an authority-led or funded home, and it was lovely. But now more and more homes are privatised. So in a sense, I don't understand why the local authorities have all handed over this responsibility to the private sector.
Well, I mean, it will have been cheaper in the short term, and yet, of course, in the long term, it will not. Same reason they privatised water. I mean, they made money out of it at some point. And I don't know. I mean, in the past, when I've thrown open the phone lines on that specific question, I don't get conclusive proof that private equity is running away with millions and millions of pounds. And I do get lots and lots of people who are running care homes who are not in private equity, private care homes, privately owned, who insist that they are working their own fingers to the bone on relatively small margins. So I don't know, actually. Again, it's a flipping celebration of my own ignorance, this topic. But that's the point, isn't it, Lauren? It's one of those things about which none of us know anything until we suddenly need to know everything. And now I've got Richard flipping Osman buzzing away in the back of my mind, because his books, of course, his crime books, are set in elderly homes, not care homes. It's just where the quality of life is absolutely extraordinary. It's like living in Claridge's. So, that relationship between assets, wealth, income, and a sense of the deserving and the undeserving poor, and the political resistance to a solution being built upon the idea that I'd be paying for people who haven't paid to receive something that I don't need. Is that what it is? And that is probably why the Tories were massively, including most doctors, by the way, were massively opposed to the NHS when Anira and Bevan. As a consequence, if I remember correctly, as a consequence of understanding the need for everybody to pay into a pot out of which not everybody would take, but everybody would be able to if they needed, something that I think he learned during a miners' strike in Wales, when there was enough money just for people to survive while on strike because they'd all paid into it. And wives and children would get it as well, not just miners, like a welfare fund. And I think that is where the seeds were sown in his mind, his magnificent, beautiful mind, for the National Health Service. We all pay into it. And even the people who don't pay into it, the children, the non-working mothers and wives, to go back to the era in which Nye Bevan was operating, they take out of it as well when they need to. And social care is not like that. It's the polar opposite. Of course, we live in a world where people think socialism is a dirty word without realising that the National Health Service is probably one of the greatest creations in the history of humanity. And it's flawed now and in need of reform and improvement. Of course it is. But its roots, pure socialism. Here's Dominic Ellis with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. So is it... okay, I listen, I'm owning my stupidity. Ignorance. I'm not stupid, obviously, but I am ignorant on this subject, and many others, actually. But I usually do a fairly good job of masking it. Why was Theresa May's proposal so unpopular? 0345 6060 973. Because at the moment, the threshold above which you have to sell stuff in order to pay for your social care is £23,250. Under Theresa May, it would have been £100,000. So how can it be unpopular? As in, you get to keep more of your money. Were you going to have to pay even if you didn't need to? Listen, you can tell, I think, that I'm not pretending to not understand this stuff. I do not understand this stuff. Why was, looking back, Theresa May's so-called dementia tax, there must have been another dimension to it, mustn't there? Because people's inheritance was threatened by factoring home values into care costs. I don't know. Phone lines are open. And this is, I can't remember the last time I did this. It's a very, very widespread, very widely known story. I didn't really pay that much attention to it at the time. I'm sorry. I cannot, for the life of me, remember why Theresa May's so-called dementia tax was so unpopular. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Listen, I probably had too many people ringing in with their own experiences to successfully kick off the second element of the conversation, which is about the political contentiousness of this. That's just the price you pay for having a full switchboard sometimes, and that's fine. And I don't want to turn you away if your story is illuminating and interesting, which it will be, because this is a very, very febrile issue. But what I haven't had, and what I do want, simple question, what happens in Scotland? 0345 6060 973. Listen, you can absolutely give me a coating for being Anglo-centric or even London-centric, but what happens in Scotland? I know that there are 4 separate systems in one country, if you like. 4 settlements, 4 nations, 4 settlements. England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. We've been talking exclusively about England. Can we learn from Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland? If so, what can we learn? What goes on? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. 11:36 is the time. Bob's in Fulham. Bob, what would you like to say?
Obviously, James, I'm not going to go through a lot of detail what my brother and I had to do with my mother, but it reflects quite closely to what a lot of other people have said.
Okay.
I just wanted to emphasise one thing. Please, 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 people, get power of attorney for any of your relatives that you think they're getting anywhere near not being able to handle their affairs. If you don't have that, it's infinitely more difficult. Also, once you've got power of attorney, which someone has also mentioned, it's in 2 parts. There's one for medical and one for finances. Get the backing of your siblings and everyone agree, it's your mum's money.
Yes.
Any money she's got. I've got my own theory.
Why it's so expensive?
Yes. I'm sorry, I do think people are making massive profits out of it. I also feel that this is another example, I'm afraid, James, of the whole government system, and I'm not blaming one party or the other. I'm saying the whole. And it would be the same if some of the new parties got in. It's not fit for purpose. They cannot take long-term, proper, professional approaches to projects like this. This is not a quick solution, James. I know no one is saying it is. And it does need, across the board, consensus of sense of fairness. And this is my answer to you as to why we didn't like Theresa May, why not me.
Yeah.
People want to see a sense of fairness.
Well, I thought her proposal was fair.
Yeah, but you will get some people saying, right, yes, but...
Well, what will they say? What's the actual grievance, Bob?
Because some people have got more than £100,000 savings. Some people on the million will say, well, I want it bumped up to $1 million. And if I can give you a small example of that, for example... But it was property and assets of £100,000, which is 75 grand more than where we are now. So why did people object to that? When the seed... there's an answer to this question, and it's possible neither of us know it, but there must be an answer to this question, and it will involve the thing that I am missing. So here's the system under which you're going to take everything I've got in excess of £25,000, and Theresa May said we're going to take everything you've got in excess of £100,000. Why would I object to that? I'm 75 grand better off. Yeah, but there's a lot of people out there that have got a lot more than that, and they want all their money protected. If I can give you a small example... That doesn't make sense, Bob. Can I just give you my little small example? Well, hang on. No, you can't. No, it answers that. Does it? It better? I'm prepared to pay more into the system. I am prepared... You're not answering the question of why I object to a £100,000 threshold when the threshold is currently much lower than that. Because you've got £250,000. Yes. And once the 100,000... you want to be covered up the £250,000 because you think you should be covered for everything. Yeah, but it's 25 grand at the moment. I know. So why am I crosser than I am at 100 than I am at 25 when it's £75,000 more? I'm being thick. I know I'm being thick, but you don't know the answer either. I'm trying to answer it from my perspective. That's why I think they did. They're really rich people. In the same way, James, I'm very fortunate. I'd be very happy to give up my heating as a pensioner. I'm 73. I'd be very happy to give it up. I'd be very happy to pay a lot more tax. I really would. Yeah. Because this is a massive issue, this care home thing. I know, but we don't know. I mean, I don't want to sound impatient, but you don't know the answer to the question that I'm asking. Because some people are not prepared to pay enough into the system. But they'd be better off under Theresa May's system than they were previously. You covered a lot of topics in the past, James, where actually the logic doesn't come into it. Well, you could be right. Do you know what, Bob? You could be right, mate. And it's a emotive feeling. Yeah. I want to be covered. Why should the person... I've saved $2 million, I should be covered. Yeah. Instead of thinking I should be lucky I've got $2 million. But the elephant in the room is the sense of fairness across the whole board, and it's not just the care homes. I will pay more into the system, James, but I just want a sense of fairness. Thank God I had power of attorney, and thank God my mum, bless her cotton socks, had saved money, and we it was her money, and we had to use that. It's 4 years ago now, but that was $7,000. What do you mean, briefly? What do you mean by fairness? Because the people who can afford to pay for it currently have to pay for it, while the people who can't afford to pay for it don't. Is that not fair in your mind? No, because unfortunately, some people, and I have to say, and this is a weakness in myself, and I have to say, sometimes I fall into the trap. I get angry when I see people in there who put nothing into the system and getting everything that my poor old mum is having. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I'm sorry. No, you don't apologise. No, don't apologise. It's a perfectly natural feeling. But is that it? I mean, is it that simple that A, it's emotive rather than an intellectual objection, and B, why should they get it for free when we have to pay for it? To which the answer is because they haven't got any money. But that doesn't matter. That's not fair. Why should I have to pay for something that they get for free? Maybe that's it. But then I'm stuck, and I appreciate it's a bit like a bear with a sore head on that, because I get so frustrated when I'm almost certainly missing something quite simple. Could it really be, as Bob says, that all of the people that were objecting to Theresa May's proposal were just idiots?
because they were actually going to be hit with a £100,000 threshold where previously it was 23. And oh, man alive. From Bob to Rob. And actually, speaking of Bob, have we done that calculation yet? Do we know what the current Bob is? What is the Burnham optimism barometer telling us? Have we done? All you have to do is add up all the numbers and then divide them by the number of numbers. So what's the figure? You're just going to make something up now, aren't you? Of course it's easy. Dear. I'll do it myself. It's 11:43. Rob's in Hamburg. Rob, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James,
Hello.
from sunny Hamburg. I thought you and your listeners might be interested to know what Helmut Kohl introduced here in 1995 with regard to senior citizen or elderly care. We all have here private insurance. It's not particularly exclusive. There is no national health system here. And it's quite expensive. It's almost 20% of your income, of which your employer or the government pays half. But in 1995, Helmut Kohl introduced a tax or an investment. If I could translate it, it's elderly care or senior citizen care. 4.2% of your gross income. If you have children, it's 3.8%. When senior citizens...
Why is it less for parents?
Well, if you have... Well, of course... Parents have a number of financial and tax advantages.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm just
But it's 4.2%. And I was
Quite
telling
a
your
lot.
colleague, in my circle of friends, acquaintances, neighbour and colleagues, nobody complains about this tax. We get it drummed into us, into the news and in television magazine programmes. We have a particular demographic gap problem here in Germany, which is why Frau Merkel wanted to get a lot of people with other cultural roots in here. That's just one of the things. And it's really drummed into us that there's no alternative. We have got to pay this extra tax. And most of us see it as a good investment. Who wants to be in discomfort or pain? You know, healthcare is expensive here, and it's getting more expensive. And even at the very high level of quality here, one of the main aims of the present government is to try and improve it further.
So why did it crash and burn then? I mean, because what you're describing, it might have a little bit of short-term objection based upon what Bob was describing as this sort of inbuilt sense of either I jolly well deserve all the money that I've accrued in the course of my life, and anybody who hasn't accrued any money is probably a work-shy layabout with a flat-screen television. No. But, you know, and of course, 4.8, 3.2, whatever you're putting
4.2%.
4.2.
I'm reading it here now. My main health insurance is 14.6%, and my senior health care is 4.2%.
See, we call it health insurance because that's how it is broken down. But I look at my income tax bill, and I can go on the website and see the pie chart of how much of that goes to the NHS. So it's in some ways it's a similar principle. It's just counted differently, and it's called a different thing. But the idea is that everybody pays in, and only some people take out, right?
Oh, no, over here we see it a bit more from a social aspect. Yeah. We hope it's not us.
Yeah.
But we gladly pay for our friends.
Okay, well, there it is. You've done it. You're the winner. So that is a cultural difference, is it? Or
yes, it is a little bit. It's not. I'm not going to suggest everything's perfect here. It's not. We have some horrendous problems. But what's social and healthcare regarding those things? In all my life, I'm retared now, fortunately, but my colleagues and, you know, with whom you spend almost a third of your life, and my friends and neighbours, we never complain about the cost or availability of healthcare, although that is starting to change because it's also starting to buckle. But you know, the other day, James, you were mentioning about you can afford a holiday, but not that holiday.
Yeah.
That's what we want from Andy Burnham and others. Good leadership, a bit of statesmanship, and someone to come on the telly and say, look, folks, I'm sorry, I've got bad news. We've been living beyond our means.
We can't do this. What's your optimism quotient at the moment?
Well, he's between 7 and 8. But of course, I'm one of those people, since I left the UK, I haven't had a vote anywhere. I just have to put up with everything, I'm afraid.
It's overrated, mate. There's a talk this morning about compulsory voting being introduced, which strikes me as a very good old-fashioned phone-in. But I don't know what we're going to do after 12, actually. There's only one way to find out. You better stay tuned. Thank you, Rob, and thank you to Bob, who was on before Rob and was possibly on the receiving end of my impatience with my own failure to understand the issue. So sorry if I was a little robust, but I still don't get it. Why did Theresa May's thing crash and burn when all it did was increase the threshold on your property and saving assets? And who I hate it when I feel stupid on the radio. You're probably used to it, but most of the time when I'm being stupid on the radio, I'm too stupid to realise I'm being stupid.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, I hope this doesn't reach your ears as a bit of a cop-out, right? But sometimes I think the failure to understand something is the point. So I obviously am a little bit embarrassed that I can't work out why Theresa May's so-called dementia tax was so unpopular. There's one bit that's missing from what I've told you so far. It would have extended that calculation onto what you have to pay for from people in care homes to people receiving care in their own homes. So you'd have been on the hook for that if you had assets worth more than £23,500, but they wouldn't have come for your home until after you were no longer in it. If you see what I mean, whether you'd been taken out of it in, having passed away, or whether you'd moved into a home. So was it just people eyeing up an erosion of their expected inheritance? Or was it just because it happened in a general election campaign and felt a bit cheeky? Theresa May presumably thought this would be a vote winner. Admittedly, she was being advised by one of the most ridiculous people in modern politics, Nick Timothy, but Theresa May herself was no slouch. She obviously thought it would be a vote winner, and it ended up being the opposite. It ended up being a vote hemorrhage. And why? Because people felt that their own money was being taken away and that great mythical undeserving blob was going to... I don't know, but that could be the point. My failure to understand this could be the point. It's why this is such a tricky, thorny, impenetrable political issue. 11:52 is the time. Andy's in Chelmsford. Andy, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. There may be an extra point to this you're missing about the Theresa May budget.
Well, there must be. There must be, Andy. By all that's holy, there has to be something missing.
I'll just quickly tell you what I think it is.
Go on.
Okay, right. The first crack she had at this, because she initially put out a plan and there was a backlash and she did a second plan.
Right.
The first plan was to cap it at £100,000.
Yeah.
Okay? Which, as you say, would have been an advantage to everybody.
Yeah.
But there was a big backlash from people down south because they said, right, the average price for a house up north in those days was about 200 grand, and down south it was about 750, 800 grand.
Are you sure? This is your full memory? 2020 hindsight?
No, I completely remember this.
Okay.
So people down south complained and said, this is unfair, it's disproportionate because we're having to pay an awful lot more of the value of our house. So what Theresa May did was turn around and say, right, what I'm suggesting I'll do now, I'll put a £200,000 cap on it, so you only pay £200,000, okay? And then the people down south said, the people up north said, this is ridiculous. If we've got a £300,000 house, we pay 2/3 of it, whereas people down south have got a £1 million house, still get left with 800 grand. So everyone up north got upset. So it was the first thing was a 100 grand cap, but the second thing was the £200,000 absolute amount. And so that meant she was getting flack from both sides of the country, and then she gave up on it.
Do you want the good news or the bad news?
Go on, give me the bad news.
I haven't felt like this since I was studying my AO level in statistics.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
The good news is I think you're probably right.
Okay, right, yeah, thank you. Oh, my God, you're admitting I'm right.
I think you are, because that right. I mean, the cap is a huge issue, right? Because that's going to have a massive impact depending on geography.
Yeah.
And then the bit that we don't get is the £100,000 being something to object to, even if you are living down south, because at the moment it's a quarter.
I agree. I completely agree. The whole thing was ludicrous. Everyone would have been far better off if they'd just taken the 100 grand cap and gone. Actually,
so it was the Daily Blooming Mail, probably. I mean, I don't remember who led the objections to it, but it's usually them, isn't it?
Well, they definitely complained about the £200,000. Sorry, the Daily Mail complained about the £100,000 cap, and then basically the left wing complained about the. So the left wing complained about.
So no one can win. So what should Andy Burnham? Here you go. Seeing as you're currently teacher's pet, what should Andy Burnham do?
Ah, crikey! I'm in the same situation as a lot of people. I've got a mother in a care home,
right?
And I had to sell our house last year to pay the care home fees. And I went through exactly what everybody else went through, the whole thing. I had to find it myself, and you didn't know what you were doing, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So that was unpleasant. The one thing I will say that in my mother's care home, because she's in one that's quite nice. Having said that, I had to move her up to Hexham from Oxford. But the one that she's quite nice, weirdly, isn't much more expensive than the ones that aren't nice. The big difference is that I found the care home my mother's in, very nice care home, and they've got like little suites where you've got like a living room and a bedroom and a bathroom separate. And it seems to me that if you're funding the care yourself, you get put into one of those rooms. If you're not funding it, you don't. But, I mean, it's a slight silver lining to this. I have checked it with the care home, and if my mother ever does run out of money, which is a very nice care home, all they do is they move her out of one of the better rooms and move her into a slightly worse room.
Got it.
But all the rooms are very nice, and the care home is lovely. So, I'm happy with that.
And that makes you lucky.
Very lucky, yeah.
I know you know that. And, of course, the thing that is hardest to quantify almost politically is luck. Very few people want to admit that they're lucky, or at least the loudest voices in our politics now, for my entire life, I think, are very resistant to the idea that they're lucky, that there's any luck involved.
But it's a lottery. It's a complete lottery when you come to care homes.
And you're Scottish, so what do you know? Do you happen to know what would have happened if...
I don't, because I've lived down in London down in England for 40 years, so I don't know.
London?
I don't know. Sorry? London, okay, yes, right, yes.
It's 11:50. It's the number of people this weekend. Well, I say the number of people. I've had a lot of messages saying I can't hear the word London now without hearing London in my own head. But on one occasion, when I was in Morrison's walking past the cooked meat, and someone went, London! Stop for a chat. I don't think we'll stay with it because it would drive Keith mad, I imagine, trying to listen out for that. But it was rather lovely while it lasted. Anyway, we've got a new feature now. We've got Bob. We've got the Burnham Optimism Barometer, which is still broken, apparently. Hang on, just let me... Can we get a figure for... Is that any... No? Okay. Mike's in Ripon. And did you see, there's a lovely thing, Satnam Sanghera, one of my favourite writers, a great book out at the moment about George Michael. He ended up in Ripon at the weekend and he couldn't believe his eyes, Mike. He couldn't believe his eyes. It's such a beautiful... Well, just the cathedral, the beauty of the place and how little known it is outside North Yorkshire. That was his thesis.
Very discerning man.
Very discerning man. It's got my... my second... I mean, Fountains Abbey's just up the road for you, which is my second favourite ruined abbey in North Yorkshire, Mike.
It is lovely.
It is lovely. Go on, what made you pick up the phone?
OK, well, I have some authority, I think, to speak. My wife died recently
I'm sorry.
With dementia.
I'm very sorry.
Thank you. She lived in a care home for the last 3.5 years of her life, and she had care at home before that. In total, we spent over £400,000 caring for my wife. The situation here, the value of the house is immaterial because so long as the spouse, i.e. me, lives in the house, that's okay.
Yes.
But so that doesn't come into the equation. But the problem with Theresa May's plan was, if you take two people, one that starts off with, say, £120,000 of assets, and the other starts off with £1 million, they would spend respectively £20,000 in the first case or £900,000 in the second case before they both end up with £100,000.
Yeah.
And which is quite a sum of money.
But is that not what happens anyway?
10% of $1 million.
But isn't that what happens anyway with £23,500 being the...
Yeah. So you are right to the extent that
you'd have been left with more than you'd have been left with more than you would have been left before she introduced.
Yeah, but you would. But one person has only lost or spent 20,000, so they still feel as though they've got 100,000, which is more or less where they started from.
Yeah.
But the person that started with $1 million has lost 900,000 if the person lives that long.
Yeah, I get
that. And they're only left with 100, which they've been wiped out, really.
Yeah, but it's a lot more than 23,250,000.
Okay, I don't know how much money you've got, but if you lost 90% of it, would you feel as though you'd been...
No, you're not.
You'd had a bad day.
One of us is missing the point here, and I've got a horrible feeling it's me, because it doesn't matter how much money I've got. If I've only got 23,250 left...
Yeah.
Then I'm worse off than I would be if I'd got 100,000 left.
Yes, but it's the relativity of it, isn't it?
No.
Well, it is. Somebody might say, I've got a really good job, I earn 50,000 a year. The next person might say, well, that's small change to me, I earn $500,000 a year.
Yeah, but the bottom line, everybody was going to be better off under the Theresa May's plan. Everybody, whatever they started with...
OK, so if Mr Burnham reduces bus fares to £2, that means a lot.
I'm confused enough as it is, Michael. Well, don't bring buses into it.
OK, well, I just thought it might help with an example.
But it doesn't help at all, and now I feel bad. I feel like I feel like you're a cat and you've brought me a mouse, and I've said, I don't want your mouse, Mike.
Well, you'd meet an awful lot of people when you've got someone close to you living in a care home.
I'm sure you do.
And most people are happy to pay a proportion of the money, but they need to be supported by the state.
That's the absolute holy grail, really, isn't it? Is knowing what is proportionate. But just to make sure I'm not going mad, you acknowledge that Theresa May increased by £75,000 the amount of money that everybody would be left with, regardless of how much
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So what were they cross about?
Well, it's the relativity.
No,
because somebody's lost 90% of their savings.
Yeah.
Whereas the other person's only lost 20 out of 120, 16% of their savings.
Yeah, no, so that's what they objected to, even though they were better off under the previous system. So it doesn't actually make sense, what you're saying, but it is a point.
Yes. So if, say, the threshold for income tax was increased by £1,000, everybody would benefit. The person at the lower end
would benefit a lot more. No, I know what relative means, right? I'm not a complete flump.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's another example.
Well, it isn't. So I think you're probably right, but you're also wrong, because they are all better off than they were before. So that doesn't explain why changing it would have made us so unpopular, because, anyway, it explains why the original system is... Do you want to know what my favourite ruined abbey in North Yorkshire is?
Ireland?
No, keep guessing.
The one there, there's one there, go on, you tell me.
No, near where? It's not Whitby, near where? It's near Helmsley.
It's a big county.
It is a big county.
Near Helmsley.
Near Helmsley, yeah, go on.
Oh, Revo Abbey?
Oh, you're a winner, mate. You got it, mate.
Say, I got something right then, anyway.
It's a beautiful
I honestly think my first example is right as well.
I think it is right as well, but it doesn't, I mean, Revo Abbey. Can you spell it, Mike?
Well, I got there eventually.
Can you spell it?
R-I-E.
No. Yes.
U.
No.
There's an L in it somewhere.
There is an L in it as well. R-I-E-V-A-U-L-X.
A-U-X.
L-X.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're a legend, Mike. Thank you for playing. And he's right. I mean, that is the ultimate call. He's right, but he's wrong. And I'm wrong, but I'm also right. It's 12:03.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 6 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So I mentioned to you last week that one of my old producers came to visit, which was nice, because we're all one big happy family here on the James O'Brien Experience. I've just got a message from another of my old producers who says, I've been listening to you grapple with this Theresa May story over the last 2 hours. He thinks he knows what happened here, because he is now a political correspondent and speaks to a lot of politicians. And he says, my understanding of why her plan failed from speaking to, and then I don't know that I have his permission to list the people that he was speaking to, but trust me, that Boris Johnson couldn't let Theresa May do anything that might have warranted success. And because we were in the middle of the Brexit thing, he was able to scupper the whole thing. He needed to get the public on side against May, and with the help, of course, of his friends at the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph and all the rest of it, he managed to get Theresa May massively undermined. She could never have a fair crack at getting the story in front of the public in a way that would have actually made its benefits apparent, which actually fits better than any of the other explanations that we've had, is that it was a moment of Brexit-related madness where something that was imperfect but an improvement on what went before was sold to the British public as a disaster. With a side order of Mike in Ripon explaining why people don't like the principle, but if you accepted that the tinkering to the principle actually made people better off than they were. Anyway, that's 2 hours of your life you're never going to get back again. And it still remains very much one of those subjects about which you know nothing until you need to know everything. Everything. 8 minutes after 12 is the time. So from one generation, although, of course, next time we talk about social care, we should really confine the conversation to people of working age, or fighting age if you're a racist, to people of working age, because that is 50% of the social care bill, and we never talk about that. Is there money to be saved there? I do not know. But one area which is coming under almost constant scrutiny at the moment is young people in receipt of welfare payments for mental health issues. And although the numbers are relatively small, they are high enough to merit at least some of the scrutiny. The Times front page today, it is the biggest story in the Times. Teen anxiety pays more than job. To which, if I have trained you well, you will know immediately that the questions you should be asking will be about how many people are actually affected, how hard is it to get a personal independence payment. If you're really getting it for anxiety, then what sort of hoops will you have been required to jump through? And is it really just anxiety? Or would this also include depression, autism, ADHD, and various other debilitating conditions? Who bothers to do that when you could simply say a 16-year-old working 12 hours a week is getting less than a teenager pretending to be anxious? Which, of course, there'll be plenty of people queuing up to do. But listen, you can't turn these conversations into a zero-sum game, I don't think. To claim that none of these young people are deserving of the support that they're receiving from the state is obviously a much stupider position to adopt than claiming that they all are. But there will be some who, I think trying to identify fraudsters and lead swingers is pretty much a waste of time, because if you create a safety net in a society, there will always be a relatively small, probably negligible number of people who choose to treat the safety net as a trampoline. I remember the first time I came up with that analogy. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's all right. It's not great, but it works, right? Here's a safety net. And some people will choose to bounce around in the safety net rather than simply using it as a temporary refuge before they get back up on the tightrope that is life. So how nice should the safety net be? And should we reduce the quality of the safety net because some people have chosen to use it as a trampoline? These are questions that are never really wrestled with in newspaper articles based upon a largely confected accusation that teenagers with anxiety could easily go out to work if only they pulled their socks up and, I don't know, ate their greens. But there is something here that society is failing to do. Some extraordinary detail in the Telegraph, who report on the same story, about the Dutch model, about what happens in the Netherlands in order to help young people somehow overcome this inability to get into the workplace. It is, I read this morning that children with disabilities are compelled to do things like pick up litter, or it suddenly had an image, because you hear the word disability, you think physical, I think, still, rather than mental. But of course, the word applies equally to both. So I don't know whether in the Netherlands you have young people in, for example, wheelchairs who are required to go around picking up litter. But there's a good piece by the education editor of the Telegraph today looking at the Dutch model, what the Netherlands government has done in order to save young people from worklessness. And I love that phrase, because worklessness is not a desirable situation to be in. It's why, in many ways, the people who've chosen to treat the safety net as a trampoline should be pitied, and they should certainly not be used as a reason to start cutting holes in the safety net or to claim that everybody else in it is malingering or inauthentic. It's to save young people from worklessness. I don't know if you've got anyone in your life like this, but I do know that if you do, you probably know in your heart of hearts that they would much rather not be like this. So I was chatting to a friend the other day. I mentioned this to you, and they were talking about their child. They were talking about their 19-year-old, and they are, if you like, a NEET. They're not really doing anything, and they're not, for the record, claiming any benefits either, but that's more a consequence of their parents' financial situation than anything else. They could be, I presume. They'd be entitled to some things, and they do have issues with anxiety. But the phrase that their mum used was that they're frightened of the world. They're frightened of the world. So here are two versions of me, right? Two very real versions of me, one that currently exists and one that used to exist. When I was young, some people carry anxiety and tension in their tummies. Some people carry it in their heads. I don't know where else you could carry it. But for me, anxiety has always been very gastric. It's always been very intestinal. You know, when you're sick with nerves, for me, it was a very real reality, a very real thing. And for a long period of my life, I was sick with anxiety. You never would have known it if you'd met me, but I was. And often, forgive me if you're having your lunch at the moment, I won't labour the point, I was often literally sick. I would often excuse myself in social situations, particularly when I was a gossip columnist, when I was trying to get into journalism. I would excuse myself, I would go to and I knew it was happening, and I would be sick. And then I would go back and carry on being the public me, the public version of me, the sort of loud and apparently very confident me. I don't know if I was frightened of the world, but that was real, and it stayed in place, actually, to varying degrees. It would come and go. I used to get it a lot when I was asking girls out as well, so we'd be going right back to like 15, 16 years old. But more so than any of my friends, because people you were close to, you could ask them, I said, do you do that? Do you get? No, I don't, you weirdo, they would say to me with great love and affection. So I carried extraordinary levels of anxiety inside me for much of my life. It was only really when I started therapy that they began to dissipate. And old me would now say, and I did perfectly well. I managed to get out there into the world. I managed to hold down 3 jobs at the same time. I was measuring inside legs on Regent Street every Saturday while going out as a gossip columnist every weekday night, trying to get stories that I'd get paid for. I managed to push through. I managed to do this. I managed to be resilient. And that was a real version of me. That person existed. And maybe sometimes it might seem to you I've gone too far the other way now, and I have nothing but compassion, empathy and sympathy for young people who describe themselves or who are described by their own parents as being frightened of the world. Frightened of the world. But I honestly think that it is the biggest explainer of what we call needs. I've got absolutely no statistical or evidential basis for that. I've just got a brain and a pair of eyes and, I hope, a warm heart. And I look at these young people, some of whom I may know, some of whom I rely upon your testimony to discover, and I don't believe that they're all sitting around picking their noses and laughing at taxpayers. I just don't believe it. And I don't believe that they're going to PIP assessments trying to get money by exaggerating that. I just don't believe it. I could be horribly naive. Some people will be, don't get me wrong. There will always be lead swingers. There will always be safety net bouncers. But I think the biggest explainer, and it will be linked partly to COVID, it will be linked partly to technology, partly to the internet, the smartphone, the constant exposure to things that are too stimulating and too traumatizing often, and the constant comparisons with others, that just this constant noise in your head that we did not grow up with. And it has left them frightened of the world. The Dutch disability benefit system provides distinct support for 2 groups. There are disabled individuals who have worked before and those who have not. If you are in the latter category, and that will be the one where young people are predominant, you used to get financial support, about 75% of the minimum youth wage. But in 2015, they changed and began differentiating. So this is pre-COVID. Claimants with some capacity to work and those with no capacity. So that their capacity would be determined through an evaluation of their medical documentation and educational records. And if you were found to be fully incapacitated, you got the full sum. But if you were found to have some capability of working, then your income would be reduced accordingly. And it is, if you like, and then they introduce things like reciprocal service or counter performance, which just involves sending young people out to litter pick, to renovate playgrounds, to serve coffee in a community centre, or to read to children in schools. So it's not a normal paid job, so you can't sign these people up to provide free labour for a commercial business or fill a role that someone else is normally paid to do. but you can essentially ease people into work-like contexts. Work-like contexts. And what I want you to do next is tell me what you can do to help a young person who is frightened of the world. And the key word is help. And sometimes we need to remind ourselves that cliches are cliches for a reason. They all contain kernels of truth. Sometimes perhaps you need to be cruel to be kind. I don't know. I'd prefer it to come from experience, and I'd prefer the experience to be both current and real. So, you know, my 20-year-old stories of vomiting are not particularly pertinent to this, except to prove that I know what anxiety is, but not at a level that prevented me from working. Maybe it would today. Maybe today I wouldn't feel compelled to push myself, and I don't think it did me any lasting harm, but who the hell knows? How do you stop a young person being frightened of the world? Because that fear of the world is why they're not engaging with education, employment or training. How do you do it? How did you do it? 0345 6060 973. So at one extreme, you've got old me pushing through regardless, and I think, you know, doing all right as a consequence, but that's no way to live. If I'd had less support, or if I'd been less ambitious or less arrogant, if I hadn't been to the kind of school that I'd been to, maybe I'd have fallen off the horse. Maybe I'd have fallen by the wayside because my fear of the world would have been too much to bear. But that's what public schools are designed to do. They're designed to make you outwardly confident, but inwardly vulnerable and broken often. Just look at Boris Johnson. But that's what they are designed to do. So if I hadn't gone to a school like that, maybe my fear of the world would have crippled me. What do you do now for this generation of young people? How do you stop them being frightened of the world? 0345 6060 973. Because it's in all our interests to find answers to this. And I don't think you need to be the king of woke to realise that the answer is unlikely to be screaming at these people and maligning them and insulting them and further impoverishing them and calling them names and reminding them how... You get the picture. How do you help a young person who is frightened of the world? And is there anything society can do about it as opposed to family, loved ones, and support structures? It's 12:22.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's such a weird word as well, anxiety. If you were to go for a PIP assessment and you were to be approved, which is vanishingly rare, not that you'd know it from much of the coverage today, then the sort of things you would need to prove would include an inability to perform daily tasks. So imagine being so anxious that you can't cook or wash or eat or dress. Social engagement would cause a panic attack, major distress around other people. And the proof you have to provide would have to come from your GP or your mental health worker. And it wouldn't be enough to simply turn up. Do you know this? Do you think most of the people you hear on your radio talking about young people with anxiety know this? Do they bother even to do the most cursory research? You can't just turn up with a diagnosis and say, oh, thank you very much, that's £194. You have to provide a letter from your GP or your mental health worker. And if you've got a mental health worker in this country at this time, you are ill. And that would describe the specific everyday limits on your ability to do things, not just your diagnosis. You'd have to provide really clear examples of what happens on your worst days, including how often you experience panic attacks. Now, the average employer, if they know that you are subject to panic attacks and you won't know on what days they're going to happen, is unlikely to favour you when looking for an employee over somebody who is only going to take time off work with more obvious and visible conditions, which will be very rare. I have a panic attack twice a month. I don't know what days it's going to be on. Let's just hope that we're not busy in the shop on the days that I have it. Do you see what I mean? But the key bit here, agoraphobia is anxiety. Severe panic attacks are consequences of anxiety. The people getting personal independence payments for anxiety have to prove incredibly debilitating conditions that are not really even comparable to me being sick at work. It's not even, I wouldn't get it. Regularly vomiting, because I can come out, sorry to labour this point, but I think it's relevant. So that level of anxiety is what gets you PIP. But PIP isn't even 1 in 10 of the people that are in this category of 1 million. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we can fix people with medical grade anxiety by changing the way we do things or making them pick up litter. I want to be clear about that. But 9 out of 10 young people not in education, employment or training are not qualifying for any benefits, any disability benefits, any personal independence payments, or more probably. And this phrase that's haunting me at the moment, scared of the world, how do we fix that? Together. How do we fix that together? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 12:26. Martin's in Southampton. Martin, what would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to kind of come at this from a sort of parallel direction. My younger sister, about a decade younger than me, and my best friend both suffer from anxiety and they're both neurodiverse. So my sister's got ADHD, my best friend has ASD. And in sort of completely separately, I'm quite a privileged position that I was able to employ both of them. And in doing so, was able to offer a sort of a level of flexibility and not really demanding anything from them, but giving them the space to do something that you really wouldn't get.
Yeah.
And sort of going somewhere between volunteering and benefits and employment in a sort of a bit of a grey area. But what I found was, in both instances, I almost offered too much flexibility, and both naturally started asking for deadlines and asking to do more. So this is real commercial work. It's not just sort of side stuff. But they were, both of them did a lot better with that kind of ability to, if they weren't feeling up to it, I wasn't, if they needed a day off, they didn't have to ask.
You're a man after my own heart, because you're right to acknowledge that not all employers would be in a position to do this, and you're obviously motivated by your love of your best friend and your sister to do things that you wouldn't have done for potential employees that you didn't love or that you didn't have a previous connection with. But it's almost like breaking the seal, isn't it? It's almost like breaking the cycle. And once you have helped them break it, they actually start progressing independently.
Yeah, and I think, especially with in fact with both of them, but my sister was very much kind of reliant on my parents, and they were supporting her, very admirably, and it was completely necessary. But I think what has happened as a result of essentially being able to offer her that and give her that opportunity, she's sort of standing far more on her own. And I don't want to kind of sound like the...
You don't. You sound lovely.
You know what I mean?
No,
I don't want to be saying, it is sort of tough love or anything like that.
You mean a Victorian? You don't want to sound like a Victorian workhouse manager.
Exactly.
But it's not tough love. It's the opposite of tough love. So, here are 20 working days in a calendar month, or 23 working days in a calendar month. And there may be 3, 5 on which they can't work, but they can be incredibly productive on the other days. The problem is that we still have Victorian models of employment, and that there's no real way, short of a visionary employer like you, there's no real way of... And I'm not criticising anybody else, because it would be almost impossible in many lines of work not to know exactly how many bodies you're going to have in work every day. You've got appointments in the book for haircuts. You've got, a fixed number of customers coming through the door. You've got X number of deliveries to make. You've got paperwork to do. You need to know who's going to be there to do it, to make sense of your own schedule and your own future. But something needs to change. Something needs to change.
And it's not, I think the issue that I have with the current way, and I'm not demonising anyone in receipt of any kind of social support, but the way that it's currently structured, you are simply sort of paying people to exist and then saying, we'll offload this problem till later and hope it gets better on its own, which it won't.
No, you're brilliant. But this is what they say. And the problem is, it's not how it reaches the ears of the public. They literally say... it's not good enough just to give these people a check if they qualify if they apply. There'll be plenty of people who don't. It's not good enough to do that. We have to be helping them out of the situation that the money is designed to support them in. And they're not doing that. The problem is, largely as a consequence of the kind of journalism that is in every newspaper pretty much this morning, that the public think that there is this sort of cohort of young people who are choosing to live lives of indolence and inactivity when they would love nothing more than an opportunity like the one you provided to your sister and your best friend. Briefly, because I'm late for the news, tell me about the change you saw in either one of them.
Well, neither. So, I mean, if I go with my best friend for a minute, because I've kind of gone to my sister most of that, but he really wasn't going out, he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't moving on with his life or sort of, trying to get on with building a house, with building or, a rental or anything, just moving on with himself. And then sort of it has effectively, and it's not me, it's him, has driven forward that, actually, I'd quite like to start living now. And been the sort of the spark. And that was it. I haven't done the thing. I just put the sort of kindling there briefly, and everything else from the spark to the fuel has been him doing that.
I see. I'm a naive old soul. I think that would be of benefit to huge numbers of these people. This 1 million strong cohort. I honestly think it's a relatively small. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's also small. You see what Martin's done. It's not like world changing, but it was enough to change his friend's world, and that's what I mean by. I mean, maybe frightened of the world is the wrong phrase, but I can't currently think of a better one. How do you help these young people into the world? Because once you've helped them into it, then, a bit like a child on stabilisers. When you take the stabilisers off and they'll be off, they'll be gone. They'll be able to pedal themselves. But they just need a little bit of help in the first instance, and I don't know what that help looks like. I've got the results of Bob. They are in. The Bob, if you're just joining us, is the Burnham Optimism Barometer. And every Monday, moving forward, we're going to take a quick test of your feelings about how optimistic you are regarding Andy Burnham. And the first results are in. I'll bring them to you live on LBC after the headlines with Amelia Cox.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:35 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where I mean, the Dutch model is sort of, it's not quite compulsory volunteering, but the amount of support you will receive from the state if you're an unemployed young person in the Netherlands with a disability will change according to your work capability. And if you have a certain level of capability to work, then you will receive more if you undertake reciprocal service or counter performance. So these are roles that do not replace normal paid jobs, which means that the local council or the municipality can't kind of get free labour, which is always a danger with some of these schemes. And neither can a commercial business just sort of get unpaid labour as part of a helping young people back to work scheme. And you can't do anything that somebody else is normally paid to do. And it seems to be successful. It seems to work. There was a study published in 2022 that reported higher employment rates among the young disabled people who had done this than were reported previously. So you are allowed to ask claimants to take part in unpaid socially useful work. And the idea is, as Andy Burnham reportedly looks at the Dutch model when addressing the issue of NEET in this country, that it just breaks the seal, it breaks the cycle, it changes the relationship. And I passionately believe, and I don't use the word passionately that often, I passionately believe that is what a huge number of young people need. They just need a little bit of help. They just need someone holding the back of the bicycle when the stabilisers have come off. So you reach adulthood, you reach 18, right? You've had stabilisers on your bicycle all your life. I never thought of it like this before, but I think it works. We'll soon find out if it doesn't. So you've been pedalling away since school, but you've had stabilisers on. There's structure to your life. There's purpose to your life. Whether you like school or not, you know that you're supposed to be there and you have a fairly clear idea of what you're supposed to do when you are there. COVID probably broke stabilisers, actually. And then they got stuck back on again when we came out of lockdown and we came out of COVID. Stabilisers are there. And then suddenly the stabilisers are taken off. What happens? If you take stabilisers off bicycles that people are pedalling without them being ready for the stabilisers to be taken off. Oh, you don't need me to tell you, but I will anyway. Then you fall off your bike. And you are less likely to get back on it than you were before you fell off it. So what do you need? You just need somebody to hold you for the first few pedals without stabilisers, and then you're off. You're golden. You're away. I like this analogy. You're perfectly entitled not to. Robin's in Murfield in West Yorkshire. Robin, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi there, James. We've spoken before. I'm the dry stone waller and gardener who had a bit days. Of a
yes,
indeed had a bit of a dodgy mental health time, and
I remember.
I speak from experience because I still have it. It is a scary place out there, and we are all scared to a little bit, but we all put up a little facade to deal with it.
Yes,
and I would say I remember learning from when I had group therapy because I have borderline personality disorder amongst the joys of anxiety and depression. And I remember being told something because one of the things with BPD is that you experience very strong emotions and anxiety and fear and things. And sometimes what you can do is it's essentially the thing of doing fake it till you make it, because you have that worry, that adrenaline kick, bolstering up the anxiety. And as much as your brain is a fantastic, unfathomable sort of powerhouse of what it can do for you, it can also be fairly stupid and be duped. So if you say, "Oh, I'm scared to go out," and I have that, I have agoraphobia, which is a little bit sometimes tough to deal with when you have to work outside.
You picked a job, didn't you, Robin?
Yeah. Oh, indeed. But always good to challenge yourself.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, it is actually. I agree with that. And
sometimes you can just go, okay, my body is telling me that I'm anxious, but I'm going to say that actually I'm excited. This adrenaline, I'm going to use it for excitement. I'm excited because, I'm going somewhere where I've never been to. I'm driving down a route I'm not used to. I'm talking to someone who I might be a bit scared of. I don't know what they're going to be like because I struggle up with social situations. But try and flip it and go, I'm not scared. I'm excited. I'm excited that I'm going to be learning something new. I'm going to be going out there. I'm going to be talking to somebody new, making a new connection, helping them with their work.
But how much easier to do that with a little bit of help and guidance rather than having to generate this almost a diagnosis, isn't it, and a treatment program independently and alone?
Oh, you definitely have the support. And I think all it takes is just because we're all scared of something. Whether it's something out in the world, there's plenty out there to be scared of, the economy, every little bit. And I think sometimes we just have to realise that we're not always this facade that we put on.
I used to say, I haven't been asked for a while, probably for very good reason, to speak to young people. And I always used to say, what's the best bit of advice you can give us? One bit of advice. And I'd say, everybody else is frightened too. Everybody else is, and the ones that aren't are sociopaths. But everybody is frightened. It's just a question of how you deal with it. And we're not helping young people deal with it at the moment. And the more they deal with it, the less frightened they become, and the more productive they become, and the happier they become.
Yeah, and I think this Dutch model is a good idea in regards to just giving them that little boost that just by going out and helping someone, reading to someone, the hardest thing when you have, say, for instance, agoraphobia, is, of course, going outside. Because you think, everything, it's so scary, I can't do it. So just break it down into little chunks. You don't eat an elephant in one bite. You eat it one bite at a time.
You do, well, I mean, just for the avoidance of doubt, nobody should be eating elephants at all.
No,
I just want to be clear. I don't want this programme to get a reputation for encouraging the consumption of endangered species. But,
of course not.
I mean, I don't know if it's probably an unfashionable word or there'll be debate in the therapeutic community about the value of it or the language that should be used. But aversion therapy, do the thing that do the thing that frightens you in very, very small doses, and it becomes less frightening all the time. So there's a lot that can be done to help these people, and probably shouting at them and calling them lazy is not on that list, Robin.
No, you will do the opposite. And but I remember my sort of social worker, my therapist and things saying, just put your shoes on and then see how you feel walking about in them. Because when you're in slippers and you're in slacks, you don't want to do anything. But if you've got your walking shoes on, you've got a purpose. And that will be a bit like with the Dutch model. I think if they put on the shoes on, they say like, oh, I'm just going to, to help, just do a bit of reading. Break it down. Don't make it feel like, oh, I'm going out to the big world. I'm going places I don't know with people I haven't seen before. So I'm just going to go and read. That's all.
Yeah, and you go home with a spring in your step that night, that day, because you've actually done something. Because the thing that's always missing from these conversations, I'm so glad you were listening today, is how the young people feel about feeling the way that they feel, just to get all the feels into a single sentence. They are not sitting there congratulating themselves on gaming the system or avoiding the 9 to 5. They're sitting there feeling either nothing, which I think is quite common, or feeling worse about the fact that they're not doing anything than most people can imagine. And that would be one way of doing it. So it doesn't really matter what it is. It's just doing something. That's why I use the phrase breaking the cycle. Robin, thank you. And thank you for acknowledging, as everyone is doing on the programme today, whether we're talking about social care for the elderly and people with dementia, or whether we're talking about the necessity of helping young people into the workspace, just acknowledging serendipity. I'm lucky to have access to these services. I'm not lucky to have these conditions, but luckier than people who've got the conditions and not the support. That's all we're really talking about. Stabilisers. You take off the stabilisers and the child needs help. And at the moment they don't get any help, or they're getting next to no help. And even if they're getting money, this is the bit that's missing from the political discourse, even if they're getting money, they're not getting help. And there will, look, of course there are going to be lead swingers. Let me just read you a few texts that really sum up the complexity of the conversation. And I've got no beef with any of these texters, but let me read them in order. Anthony, this man is so right, and it's how I treat my 8-year-old son, who I think has ADHD. If I cut him some slack, he does much better. Put pressure on him and he shuts down. He will even expend more energy rebelling. David writes, I agree with most things you say, but I literally have people in my family who are claiming PIP for anxiety, who are openly, to us, faking it because they don't want to work. It's not that difficult if you're willing to lie, and lie again. So the idea that people aren't swinging the lead is obviously false. Nobody said that there aren't any people swinging the lead, just that, A, things are not going to be as widespread as we are encouraged to believe, and B, it may even be a little bit more complicated than it looks from the outside. But lead swingers exist. Of course they do. What you don't do is use the existence of a lead swinger to treat everybody like a fraudster. Not least because of what Andy writes. PIP is not just given out, James. I don't get it, and I'm currently awaiting a below-the-knee amputation. I know many who've had legs amputated who do not qualify. PIP, personal independence payments, are not what the shouty right say that they are. And just another one on the issue of anxiety. I have to tune out of the show now as I'm about to jump onto an online support group. But thank you for the way you're demonstrating the difficulties surrounding obtaining a PIP award for anxiety disorders. And I think disorder is the operative word. I'm 35 and anxiety has ruined and taken control of my life in precisely the ways you are talking about. Thank you for advocating for those without a voice in the way that you do. Thank you. That's very kind of you, Noel. But just to take Noel and David alongside each other, just because your relative is gaming the system doesn't mean that Noel is. So what role society plays here is to acknowledge and ideally root out the fraudsters if the problem is significant, which most people in the sector doubt, but not all. But you can't use the existence of a fraudster to malign everybody who is suffering. In fact, what does it even achieve? What does pointing out a fraudster even achieve in the context of the genuine recipients? 12:47 is the time. My crack team of statisticians have been poring over the data that came pouring into the studio earlier today when we were launching the BOB, the Burnham Optimism Barometer, and the scientific calculations that they've undertaken. Keith got his abacus out. They've been toiling away since 10:15, well, we finished it at 10 past 10, didn't we? 10 past 10 was the cut-off point. Everybody texted in a number between 1 and 10 to describe how optimistic they feel about Andy Burnham. And I will reveal to you immediately after this the first entry into the... I'm going to call it the Job Bob. It's the first entry into the James O'Brien Burnham Optimism Barometer, the Job Bob. The Jobber Bob. And I will reveal to you the first score. How optimistic do you think the audience listening to this programme is about Andy Burnham right now? Find out after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:51. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And here it is. The first result on the... Do we prefer Bob or Job Bob? Jobber Bob? Jobber, the J-O-B Burnham Optimism Barometer? You just prefer it as Bob? We're overcomplicating the issue. Are we? I'm not doing a text vote on that, don't worry. There's a chance Eleanor's just made this number up. I'm not going to lie to you, because I was obviously getting a little bit stroppy about the fact that if it was Emily Maitlis, they'd probably have a massive computer in the studio now and 5 permanent members of staff crunching the numbers. If the newsagents had asked for a Burnham Optimism Barometer, it would probably be in Leicester Square at the moment and about 50 feet high with dancing girls and confetti guns. But, you know, on the little old J-O-B show, on the James O'Brien show, you just get a couple of rubber bands and an old toilet roll. But anyway, here it is. Twang! Twang! I'm just twanging the rubber bands for comic effect. The first figure. So earlier today, I asked an unscientific sample of residents of the United Kingdom to send in their optimism score regarding Andy Burnham's premiership on a scale of 1 to 10. Millions of you. That's a slight exaggeration. Thousands, Martha? Thousands or hundreds? Tens. Several. Many of you texted in. Some of you texted in. And we have collated the figures and crunched them according to a sophisticated scientific formula. And the very first figure on the Burnham Optimism Barometer is... I was hoping there might be some music, Keith, or something. No? That sounds worse than nothing, right? See, again, if it was the newsagents, they'd have an orchestra. There'd be an orchestra in the studio at the moment. 8. The figure is 8. The optimism surrounding Andy Burnham's premiership among people who can be bothered to respond to my plea is currently 8 out of 10. Now, you know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. Do you know what I'm thinking? You're thinking, will he remember to do it next week? And there's only one way to find out. Anyway, back to the conversation in hand. Dave's in Lambeth. Dave, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How you doing?
I'm all right, Dave. How you doing?
Yeah, not so bad. I'm just sort of tuning into your talking today, and I just thought I'd give you a little bit of our experience and what we've been through over the past 6 or 7 years, actually, on this thing. So really, my son, he left school during the pandemic. Right. With obviously in the way that kids left school during the pandemic, there was no big sort of goodbye or anything. Overnight, all of his friends that he hung out with, he didn't see them say goodbye or anything like that. All of this happened. He hasn't been able to get himself into work for the past sort of 6 years, but it's not really him not being able to. It's the fact that he's obviously got issues with going to work and being out there and all that sort of stuff.
What sort of issues? What do you mean?
Well, he's
anxious.
He's anxious. Yeah. He doesn't like authority. He prefers to be at home in this room playing PlayStation. Yeah. We've evicted him from the house a few times, but he's come back. He doesn't really particularly want to work or do anything. So just to give a summary of where we are at the moment, I gave him a letter a couple of months ago to say he needs to be in an education and training or an employment, or he needs to go to the doctor who needs to provide him something to tell us why he won't work and why he won't go out of the house.
So he sounds depressed to an amateur. doesn't he? I mean, to me at least.
Yeah, he's clearly depressed. He's clearly depressed, but this is the bigger problem of it. Of course it is. So when you've got young people and you know that they've got depression, and then your son and your family, you've got really no help from anybody in authority whatsoever. And in the sense that I can't force him to go to the doctor. I can't force him to go and seek help, even though we've desperately tried to. We've dragged him to counselling. We've done all sorts of things, everything that we possibly can to try and get him there. But you know,
he's got to want to do it himself.
Yeah,
somehow.
With this type of depression comes aggression. It also comes total ignorance or ignorance of us and lack of respect, etc., and blah blah blah. And we've got this person living in our house who doesn't want to be in our house, but doesn't want to go anywhere else, doesn't want to go out to work, doesn't want to go to training, doesn't want to do anything. Quite happy playing on his PlayStation. Going out with his mates in the evening, he still finds money for that, funnily enough. But, this is where we're at, and we're supposed to still say that we love our son and we support him. And
this is unsustainable. This is unsustainable.
It's unsustainable. And
it's horrible for you as well. I hope you're finding time to look after yourself as well, because this is like a subversion of the natural order of things. This isn't where a parent is supposed to be in relation to their child.
We've got younger kids that we want to have a good example, etc., etc., etc. But the problem is we can't get him any help, okay? The society is not set up to help, especially with the way that you apply for jobs these days.
Yeah.
Every job is applied for online.
Yeah,
you don't get to speak to people up front. There's that exchange of finding out about their lives.
What does he want? What does he want? I mean, if you got him in a vulnerable moment, because he doesn't want to spend the rest of his life playing PlayStation, even if there are moments when he thinks he does. He obviously doesn't.
I don't think he really knows what he wants, if I'm honest. But the problem is that there's nobody out there that will face him. Even if he even said, "Oh look, I want this type of job," or "I want him to do that," the answer is apply online.
Yeah.
So you're never going to have that conversation to find out about that person's character, about their aspirations, about anything about them these days, because everything is about applying for online. And as an employer myself, if I put a job out there, I get hundreds of things from all around the country, even all around the world. Okay. And all they are, they're faceless things. But I only find out about people if I speak to them.
I understand that. And in the first instance, he just needs to sit in a room with people, doesn't he, who are in a similar situation, and there's someone in front of the room who is telling them what they can and can't do, what would help. You must be frightened, Dave. You must be, because you're thinking, what's he going to be like when he's 50?
Well, this is what we ask him, and this is what I say to him. I often try to have attempt to have conversations about it, about where this is going. You know, you're closer now to 30 almost than you were to sort of 16.
Yeah.
Mathematics a bit off there, but essentially that's we that's where we're heading to, and there is a point where you think suddenly the penny is going to drop. Suddenly, you know, even I've asked him, go and do some volunteer work somewhere, anything. But I think this is where we're living in these days. And
well, he's a fairly severe example of something that is a lot more commonplace than a lot of people acknowledge. Do you? Because Asma's here now. I'm sorry I can't be more help. I'm sorry we can't talk for longer. But are there times when you think he's just a lazy so and so?
Yes.
Yeah, I bet there are.
And then my wife, and it's the biggest point of argument in the house with my wife and myself.
Yeah.
You know, because we don't know how to handle it. We really don't.
And you've only got the vocabulary of your own experiences, and
exactly.
I mean, lots of people suggesting it sounds like he's traumatized, he's depressed, but equally, all of those things can improve. You just want to see something in his own eyes that suggests to you that he wants to improve, and that, as a dad to dad, that must be awful, mate. And I'm feeling your pain actually, and what you're going through. And I know you're doing your best, and there's nothing more depressing than doing your best as a parent and not seeing any benefit or any result from it, worrying that even your best isn't good enough. But you're not alone, for what that's worth. Thank you. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Global Player. Podcasts galore, opinions, videos, all sorts of excitement. So do download it for free from your App Store now. Tom will be with you at 4. Standing in still for Sheila Fogarty, you get another week at no extra cost of Asma Mir.
James O'Brien on LBC.